Mobility cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed. Very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. And what about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park, narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide ride surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the. Is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the scouts to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's loads to talk about this morning because Glastonbury is at the top of the headlines. What happened yesterday? Well, a band called Vylan decided before Kneecap even came on, the band that has one of its members who's up on a terror charge, Kneecap were about to come on, but before them, Vylan, a band, came on, and what did they say? Well, they chanted, "Death, death," to the IDF. The IDF, of course, being the Israeli Army, the Israeli Defence Force. We'll get reaction to that. We'll also speak to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. If you've got any thoughts on what I should ask him, do let me know. And also the Shadow Welfare Secretary, Helen Whitley, will join us as well. We'll check in with my friend Lee Scott as well. He is back from Israel. He is fine, although he's broken his arm and he was in shelters and, of course, is now back safely, thank goodness. Lots to discuss here on Talk between now and 1 o'clock. I want your views on this big row at Glastonbury. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Do send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message as well, and you can give me a ring, of course. I can see the phones going already. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Stay with us here on Talk. Plenty to talk about between now and 1 o'clock. Well, I just want to play you what Vylan did. Bob Vylan is the name of this band. They are a band that played just before Kneecap, and it's really interesting because after this occurred on the BBC, it was live streamed on the BBC, on the iPlayer. It wasn't on the television, but it's been seen now hundreds of thousands of times. Bob Vylan said this.
Death, death to the IDF, death. Death, death to the IDF, death, death to the IDF, death, death to the IDF. Death, death to the IDF. Death, death to the IDF. Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah.
So that is the anti-Semitic ranting of Bob Vylan, also saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, that is, of course, a wish for Israel to be excised from the map. And it wasn't just Bob Vylan himself. There are a couple of things that happened here, or themselves, they're a band. It wasn't just them. What happened was that was broadcast on the BBC, and no one thought, do you know what? First of all, these guys are quite controversial. Maybe we shouldn't put them on before Kneecap. Those are the Glastonbury organisers. Secondly, the BBC clearly didn't look into this and think about, hold on a second here, should we be actually broadcasting this? Because they knew the very strong and controversial, and in that case anti-Semitic, political views of Bob Vylan. And then, of course, they said that exactly that clip was broadcast on the BBC yesterday. And what happened? Did they take it off? Did they warn people? Did they have an announcement? No. What happened was that Bob Vylan continued for another 40 minutes after that. Remember, you're paying for that as the licence fee. Then Kneecap came on. One of them is on a terror charge. And in fact, they had a bit of an intro video, and it starred yours truly and indeed Kevin O'Sullivan. We were there, of the people who perhaps don't like Kneecap. Let's have a quick look at my starring performance on the Glastonbury stage.
We have seen great progress since we gathered here a year ago.
Kneecap.
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 Kneecap is pretty disgusting.
A band I've never even heard of.
They'll never make anything of their lives.
A little bit of breaking news to bring you, and that is that counter-terrorism police will investigate.
Well, that was part of the video before Kneecap came on the stage. Now, I must say that I am delighted. I am delighted my broadcasting clearly got under the skin of these morally repugnant, talentless IRA terrorist apologists, to the degree that they showed a short clip before their graveyard 4 p.m. slot at one of the minor Glastonbury stages. But my thoughts today are not with the cosseted, virtue-signalling champagne socialists of that festival of hypocrisy, or the band themselves, named after a method of child abuse, who entertained these people with their hate-filled lyrics. Rather, I'm thinking today about the survivors and families of the victims of another music festival, Nova Music Festival in Israel, 378 of whom were murdered by Hamas terrorists, starting a horrendous war with many more innocent Palestinian and Israeli victims, including 9 Nova Festival hostages who have still not been freed 632 days on. Kneecap and people like Bob Vylan have a lot to say, but they don't seem to have very much to say at all about that. That's the big story we're talking about today. 0344 499 1000. Let's go straight to the debate desk. We're taking the debate to the max. Is Maxwell Marlowe, Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. Great to have you in the studio. And Max Harrison, who's a Kent County Councillor for Sheppey for Reform UK. Maxwell Marlowe, what is your reaction to what happened at Glastonbury yesterday?
I think it is reflective of the kind of moral puritanism, the nihilism of the twee English middle classes, that they all sat there and lapped it up. I think it's...
And shouted back.
And shouted back.
Not all of them, but thousands of people shouted back, death to the IDF.
Exactly, right? And it's the closest thing we've had to an extremist rally since the 1930s in this country. And it's absolutely baffling that the BBC just allowed that to continue. Absolutely fine. I will say, I do support free speech, and it's for one very good reason in this aspect. Now I know when people go to Glastonbury that is what they're endorsing. And I know who I can speak to about that. Okay, so I'm not glad this has happened.
I'm sure there are lots of people who go to Glastonbury who don't endorse that.
No, I agree. But if I know someone has gone, I'm going to say, what did you think of this? Because this will continue next year, and it'll happen the year after and the year after that. And it's going to keep going on.
It's the people who shouted back. I mean, and also, well, it's lots of issues. Some people will say as well, oh, well, do you know what, criticism of Israel, that's fine. And look, I criticise Israel. We've all criticised Israel in this room to some extent. Benjamin Netanyahu, not a nice man. Is he corrupt? Well, we'll find out. There's a big trial this week that he's been trying to get out of. But the point is that the IDF, the Israeli Defence Forces, it is an army of conscripts. It is basically, and not everybody, but basically everybody in Israel. If you guys were, you're a lot younger than me, if you guys were there, you'd be reservists or in the IDF. You may even have been called up at one stage, and there are people who are repeatedly called up because of the war in Gaza. The fact is that you're criticising basically, it's a proxy for criticising every single civilian in Israel, and that's exactly what they were doing. Max, what do you think?
Look, I mean, Glastonbury has a history of political elements to it. You know, we've seen that throughout the decades. What we've seen in the last 24 to 48 hours is pretty disgusting. It's revolting. And the idea that, you know, as you said, tens of thousands and thousands of people are chanting anti-Semitic chants that they have no idea about what I don't actually think they know what they're saying, actually. All the implications or what it means. I think the BBC has a lot of questions to ask.
Either they do know, and that's dreadful, or they don't know, and that is willfully ignorant.
Oh, both are equally as bad as each other. You know, if you're saying it deliberately because you really want to see, you know, the Israeli state completely and utterly wiped out, that's disgusting, it's morally reprehensible. And if you're doing it and you're not actually asking the questions as to why, then as you said, you're complicit in what's going on. I mean, you know, we've got to wait and see what Avon and Somerset police do. I think if they don't act very quickly, all it's going to do is prove to millions of people up and down the country who say that we have two-tier policing in this country, that is true. And if they don't get their act together, and if the BBC don't do a proper apology, and if this continues and goes on and on and on, I just think people are going to absolutely loathe what we're seeing. I think people are terrified and shocked this morning, I really do.
Just to say that Avon and Somerset police say we are aware of the comments made by acts on the West Holts stage at Glastonbury Festival this afternoon. Obviously, speaking yesterday. Video evidence will be assessed by officers to determine whether any offences may have been committed that would require a criminal investigation. So they are looking into this, but I just want to remind everybody that at this exact moment, Lucy Connolly, who sent a tweet that was abhorrent, and she shouldn't have sent it, and she expressed regret for that, sits in prison while Bob Vylan hasn't been arrested yet. I'll just put that out there. Glastonbury organiser said, Glastonbury Festival does not condone hate speech or incitement to violence of any kind from its performers. I'm sorry, that is just absolute nonsense. Glastonbury Festival does not condone hate speech or incitement to violence of any kind from its performers. Look, they have a right to reply, and I'm reading out what they've said. There's someone you've put on a stage who currently is facing a terror charge. That's all I would say. I don't want to prejudice a trial.
Can I just actually add to that? Actually, Emily Evis, who's one of the festival organisers, said there have been a lot of really heated topics this year. It's an understatement, but we remain a platform for many, many artists from all over the world, and you know, everyone is welcome here. Doesn't quite feel like that if you were in the audience and you were Jewish. Right?
I wonder how many Jewish people would feel welcome there. I wouldn't feel welcome there. Your deputy party leader, Max Richard Tice, was invited to debate the Green Party. He said he didn't feel safe. A BBC spokesperson, man or woman, we don't know, maybe they don't know either, they work for the BBC, said some of the comments were deeply offensive, adding it had issued a warning on screen about being very strong and discriminatory language. The set will not be available to watch on the BBC iPlayer. Well, I'll tell you something, hundreds of thousands of people have watched not just that, but the 40 minutes that came afterwards of Bob Vylan after this clip was played. I'm going to show you the clip again. Maybe you're just joining us. This is what Bob Vylan, who is a musician, I use the term in the loosest sense of the word, the warm-up act for the haters in Kneecap. This is what happened at Glastonbury yesterday.
Death, death to the IDF, death, death to the IDF, death, death to the IDF. Death, death to the IDF. Death, death to the IDF. Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
The reason we can show you that footage is because it was broadcast on the BBC, and 40 minutes after that, they kept broadcasting what that artist had to say. And then, of course, the BBC didn't broadcast it, but Kneecap came on. Choices were made by the Glastonbury organisers, choices were made by the BBC, choices were made by the people who attended Glastonbury and went to that stage and shouted back, death, death to the IDF. We're going to examine those choices this morning. We'll continue with the debate desk, Maxwell and Max. I'm also going to speak to the Health Secretary very shortly. Wes Streeting will join me. Stay with us.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel. Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Well, lots to discuss, and thank you to everybody who have been in touch. First of all, Paul says, "Morning, Peter. This Vylan idiot wants airtime, which the repugnant idiot unfortunately is getting. As for kneecap, who? Cheers, keep up the good common sense fight." That is Paul in Spain. Neil says, "Cardi P, if you watch Glastonbury, you know you're going to get the usual left-wing barrage of bile, but there has to be a limit. If you call for the death of anyone or any organisation, then this has no place in the UK." Lucy Connolly made some vile comments, but she didn't specifically target an individual. Well, she incited racial hatred. That is what the court found. Should she have gone to prison for that? I don't think so. She remains in prison today, and Vylan, the villain of the piece, quite literally, hasn't even been arrested yet. Look, there will be a police investigation. Hopefully that happens soon, and hopefully justice is done. Nigel says, "A question I'd have for any MP is why do you keep fining the British population, and why since COVID is it getting worse? We hate being fined and controlled by the government. That's not why any party has been put in place for a general election. Do you agree that organisations need to be stopped from controlling the population through fines and rules? Is it because those in charge can't cope with the damage and increase in lawlessness caused by mass migration across Britain?" A number of people getting in touch with thoughts for Wes Streeting. We'll talk to him in a second. In regard to Glastonbury, Phil says, "This is a vote winner for reform. Pledge that when they come to power, they will take control of the site after the event and use the pre-service site as temporary accommodation for illegal immigrants. Win-win for us all. Keep up the great work." I don't know if that's going to be your policy, Max Harrison, who's Kent County Councillor for Sheppey for Reform UK, but we are in a situation, Max, are we not, where you have so much hypocrisy, so much hatred at Glastonbury. Jeremy Corbyn was there talking about how it was wonderful, the peace and love, and that there should be no borders. And of course, Glastonbury is one of the most secure sites in the country for people who've paid hundreds of pounds to go there to hear the hate that people like Vylan are spewing out.
Are we suggesting that the far left are hypocritical? I mean,
hard to believe.
I know it's hard to believe. The irony, of course, of Bob Vylan, and I think his surname really does sum him up quite well, actually. Standing around saying, "Oh, if you want your country back, you can, shut the what's it up." You're also purporting at the same time that Palestine, with all these Palestinian flags, and they're claiming that this country is being eroded and whatnot, and that their land's been taken. It's bonkers. It's absurd. And I think it's very, very scary. I mean, most ordinary people up and down the country are very, very pro free speech. That's not in a debate. But this is actual hatred. And for some God knows reason, I don't know why, it just seems that those of the particular Jewish faith are almost like a political piñata where you can keep on bashing them, you can keep on being rude and horrible and abusive towards them, and nothing will be done. But other religious groups out there don't get that same level of treatment.
I just wonder, Maxwell Marlowe, if an artist had come on and started slagging off black people or gay people or Muslims, would the BBC have continued hearing from that person, and that clip about death at the IDF has been shown to millions of people? This is not some obscure bit of the BBC website. If that had been about Muslims, if that had been about black people or gay people or any other minority, would the BBC have said, we'll just keep showing this guy for 40 minutes?
No. Obviously, but this is the issue, right? Because the anti-Semitism is covered by a very thin lacquer of anti-Zionism, and they can frame it in that way. And they will use from people who are Jewish and also anti-Zionists. We saw someone, with a T-shirt on over the last week saying, "By the way, I don't hate Jews," at an anti-Palestine protest.
Well, it's when you have to wear a T-shirt saying "I don't hate Jews" that you sort of go, actually, is there something wrong here?
Yeah, the balaclava's off on that one, I think.
I think you're right. And also when you have, I think it was David Collier or Jake Wallace-Simons who simply replied, no, it wasn't. It was Simon Myerson, who's an absolute hero, who just replied, "I don't believe you."
Yeah, fundamentally, right? And I think most of the British people don't believe them. I'm tempted to say, actually, Bob Vylan's, performance there is almost Reform's, press office couldn't have had a better, example of why I think they'll do very well over the next few years, because I think the British people are absolutely fed up of this, as I said earlier, the moral puritanism, the nihilism, the anti-Semitism, and I think they're going to reject this sort of politics at the ballot box.
So many people getting in touch, including Amanda, who says, "Good morning, Peter. What a complete and utter embarrassment Glastonbury has become to this country. Crowds of useful idiots cheering for terrorists and terror towards other people." That is what happened yesterday. And I just wonder, we have actually Wes Streeting coming up in a minute or two, but his colleague Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, has had a word with Tim Davie, the Director General of the BBC. But retrospectively, is there actually much you can do, apart from saying that awful phrase, lessons will be learned?
Well, I think the BBC needs to definitely look itself in the mirror. And we're going to see it. I mean, this Sunday, Rod Stewart is going up on stage. Earlier this week, he said that let's give Nigel Farage and Reform UK a chance. We're going to see him booed. We're going to see him heckled. So on the one side of the political spectrum, you're going to be chastised, you're going to be absolutely bullied and abused for supporting, or purporting to claim at least, that there's a party which has got now 30% in the polls. Actually, maybe let's give them a chance. But to those who are screaming, death to, basically, death to the Israeli state, death to Jews, that's acceptable. That's where politics is now today, and that's
speaking of Rod Stewart, who said that we should give Nigel Farage a chance, there was an interview on Where Else, the BBC, just this morning, which mentioned that particular thing. Let's just have a look at that.
And if you're going to go and see Rod Stewart do the Legends slot today?
I'm slightly worried about Rod Stewart because he's come out Reform, hasn't he?
And I don't support Reform.
Yeah,
no.
I think there might have been some sort.
Rod Stewart.
I think there might have been some sort of mix-up, because I think it's that guy Charlie from Pimlico Plumbers has replaced Rod Stewart. So Rod Stewart's currently in Malaga, and Charlie.
Dom Jolly there, the left-wing comedian, just given a free run there, not challenged at all. At the end of that, shortly after that, the interviewer simply said, "Oh, we've had a lot of controversy here at Glastonbury." Yeah, well done on seeing what's beyond the end of your nose. Maxwell, is that the first time you've seen that clip?
Yeah, that's the first time I've seen this clip of Dom Jolly, who I don't even think is remotely a comedian. But that's the point, We have a political party now in the United Kingdom, whether you like them or not, ranging from 28 to 32% in the polls. But we boycott singers who support that, which actually is a democratic free choice. And I would argue, as a councillor, but as well as millions across the country, we don't incite hatred. But if you do incite genuine far-left, extreme, anti-Semitic hatred, you're going to get supported, you're going to get tens of thousands of young people screaming and chanting, and in almost like a cult-like fashion. And that's where I think British politics is broken. This is why there is such a massive gap between the Westminster political class and actually what people out there in the real world do think is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And I just think I'm absolutely totally aghast. I think that Glastonbury, sort of the head should be in their hands. I think the BBC have got a heck of a lot of apologising to do, and someone should get the sack.
What do you think about that was on BBC Breakfast this morning?
I mean, look, I will take umbrage actually there, Max, because that isn't the Westminster political class. That's the kind of liberal, middle class fundamentally, which is out there, and it's up and down the country. Actually, it's really interesting when you look at, especially where Reform or some Conservatives are getting their votes at the moment. It is so against fundamentally the values of the BBC. It's so fundamentally against a lot of these liberal institutions that we've been holding up in the UK. Probably since the late 1990s under Blair, which have really gone through a bit of a march through the institutions in line with the middle classes, but it's isolated so many people, which is why I think that BBC Breakfast clip, which I think is probably watched by a lot of twee middle class people, is going to be found really repugnant to ordinary I'm going to use a Starmer term, ordinary working people. And I think it's just indicative of a dying institution.
Quick reply on that?
Yeah, actually, I'll meet you in the middle ground, actually. I think you're right. It is that snooty, liberal elite. You see it in Westminster, you see it a lot in the media class, and you're all right. Particularly in some parts of the country, you do have that middle-class faction who absolutely abhor what people like Nigel Farage are saying. So, no, I mean, in middle ground, you are right. But again, there is a massive growing gap in this country between, as you say, the ordinary working class and actually this liberal elite.
Jill in Barking says, Peter, this idiot Bob Vylan is a play on words of the great Jewish singer Bob Dylan, whose real name, of course, is Robert Zimmerman. What a stupid, ignorant, vile person Vylan really is, plus the useful idiots cheering him on. I'm so glad I don't have a BBC licence. Colin says, let them have their Glastonbury Festival. I'm all for free speech, but I object as a licence payer for allowing the country's national broadcaster to distribute this nasty narrative. Caroline in London is our first caller today, 0344 499 1000. Caroline, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Please excuse me. I'm a little bit emotional about this.
Just take your time, Caroline.
I woke up. I don't have words what I saw and what I heard. And what is making me beyond angry, as you've already reported, you've got Lucy Connolly in prison. Now, we're not going to deny what she said on that tweet was correct. It wasn't. But come on. And now she's being manhandled in prison. You've got this man. He should have been arrested straight after, and he should go to prison. And if he's not arrested, and if he doesn't go to prison for hate crime, Peter, we have got very, very serious situation in this country.
Where are we as a country where we have this guy is an idiot, he's an anti-Semite, he's a dangerous man. He hasn't been arrested yet, I hope he is. But it's not just him. The fact is there were dozens, if not hundreds, possibly even thousands of Palestinian flags there, and there were people shouting back, death, death, to the IDF. There were people who'd gone to Glastonbury, paid their hundreds of pounds to go there to be insulated from real people for a few days, and they were shouting back that they essentially wanted to kill Jews.
Look, this is the nearest thing to 1933. I'm sorry to say, but it is. And I'm going to say something that might not be politically correct, but I don't care anymore. We have got an anti-Semitic government. And for Wes Streeting to say we've got more important things to do than talk about this, when they're putting British citizens in prison for basically free speech, we have got a problem. We have got a real problem on our hands. And also, all this stuff about Islamophobia and all this is creating racism against...
Yeah. Well, it is racism. It is racism, Caroline. Yeah. Listen, thank you so much for your thoughts. Let's speak to the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, now, who's on the line. Wes, we are talking about the Glastonbury and controversy over Vylan at the moment, or Bob Vylan. Your party colleague Lisa Nandy, who is the Culture Secretary, has spoken to the BBC about this. What she said and what does she want them to do?
So Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, is talking to the BBC Director General about how it was that these comments came to be broadcast. And I do think there are questions for the BBC and Glastonbury to answer about how such comments were platformed. I mean, always have to tread carefully in government because we don't want to go down the authoritarian and Orwellian path of starting to dictate to artists or indeed to broadcasters who you can and can't have on. That's not the kind of country I want to live in. But at the same time, the comments we heard yesterday were completely appalling. I actually think they were a publicity stunt and very self-serving, because what we should be talking about is, if you care about the conflict in the Middle East, we should be talking about the fact that, you know, perverse irony here, there are still people who are at a music festival, just like Glastonbury, Israelis, who were abducted, kidnapped, raped, murdered, and in some cases are still being held hostage. This week there was a Palestinian village in the West Bank set on fire by Israeli terrorist settlers. And in Gaza, I met this week with the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, who were warning me not just about the humanitarian catastrophe we already see today, but the genuine risk of famine as soon as the autumn. So these are serious issues. They require serious solutions and a focus of the entire international community. And I thought what we heard on the stage at Glastonbury was reprehensible. And for comparison, take the war in Ukraine. I'm in no doubt about who I want to win that war. I'm on the side of Ukraine. I want their freedom secured. Would I be chanting death to the Russians? Would I be taking joy in the loss of Russian troops that have been sacrificed at Putin's hand? Absolutely not. That's the moral equivalence.
Are you happy to call it what it was yesterday? Racist, anti-Semitic?
Look, I think it was, and I think these are. This is such a problem for the just cause of the Palestinians, of a two-state solution, of the right of the Palestinians to their own freedom, their own dignity, their own state. When people do this and say these things purporting to be supportive of the Palestinians, they actually undermine the cause. And that's just one of many tragedies. I think the other thing I'd say is someone who represents a community with both a significant Muslim and Jewish community, this sort of thing doesn't make people safe. It doesn't make people feel more safe. And look, there are lots of Jews and Muslims in my constituency at the moment who, against a backdrop of rising racism, hatred and discrimination, feel less safe in our city and in our country than they did before. So I think we've got to take these issues really seriously.
What do you think
it
says?
A hell of a lot better than publicity stunts.
What do you think it says, not just about the band themselves, but about the people who were there who shouted the chant back?
Well, I don't know what they were on, what they'd been drinking or taking that day, but they, you know, to put it mildly, they need to give their heads a wobble. As I say, I kind of draw the comparison with the war in Ukraine, where I'm, you know, as I said, very clear about who I want to win. I cannot understand, you know, and this is, for me, a moral thing. All human life is sacred. Every life matters. And one of the tragedies, I think, for Russia are the number of families whose children, fathers, and, you know, mothers will not be coming home from the front line because they have been sacrificed in Putin's imperialist adventure. Okay. And I don't take any joy in the loss of those lives. I want to see an end to that war, and I want to see Ukraine free. Okay. And I just don't understand as a human being how you take joy or give encouragement to the further loss of life. We all bleed the same.
Let's talk about domestic political issues. Is the welfare vote going to go through on Tuesday, do you think? And surely Keir Starmer, by only engaging with the issue on Thursday, has dropped the ball here.
Yes, I think we're in a much better position now than we were this time last week.
Because you've capitulated to the backbenchers.
I don't see it like that. And similarly,
really?
I don't actually view my friends and colleagues as rebels. I think on an issue as serious as this, where, you know, there are lots of people, including some of the most vulnerable and poorest in our society, who are potentially affected by these decisions, it's really important we get this right.
Well, why didn't you just listen to them in the first place then, rather than this being a botched job, putting together a bill that may well go through on Tuesday, but is very different from your original policy?
Well, to be fair, the bill was only published, so the detail of, you know, the policy was announced a month ago. The detail was only published the other week. Labour MPs have scrutinised it and said, not only do we have concerns, but we've got such serious concerns that we're not even going to wait for the stage at which we bring amendments. We're going to signal those concerns up front in an extraordinary way to make sure that the government gets the message and works with us to make the changes. Now, you know, that's not, you know, as the Prime Minister has acknowledged, we'd rather have got to that stage a bit sooner and in a smoother way. But we have got to a better position. And look, where we get things wrong, and look, we are going to make mistakes.
Well, you're making a lot of mistakes, and actually your polling rating is one of the lowest, and Keir Starmer's polling rating is one of the lowest of a Prime Minister who's made it to a year. Of course, Liz Truss didn't. But we're in a situation where a year on, you should be celebrating on Friday, and you have very, very little to celebrate a year on from Labour's victory.
I'll say a couple of things in response to that. Firstly, when we make mistakes, it's really important we hold our hands up, put it right and learn from it. And as for celebrating this week, we have marked a year in office. In that time, we've done some really important things. Interest rates falling 4 times in a row, wages finally rising faster than the cost of living in our country, 250,000 off NHS waiting lists, free primary schools, breakfast clubs being rolled out, and there'll be much more to come. Okay. But I won't actually be celebrating until I've done the job that the Prime Minister and the country have set for me.
Let's talk about your obesity.
Get our NHS back on its feet and make sure it's fit for the future.
Let's talk about your obesity strategy. Part of that will be putting millions of people onto weight loss jabs. It looks like a quick fix, and there are many, many problems in lots of people saying that they are can be very, very dangerous. And of course, there are many safety concerns about these jabs. Are you not just going to rely on them? Is this a quick fix, medicalising the problem of obesity in our society?
So obesity is one of the biggest challenges we face. It's doubled, actually, since the 1990s. 1 in 5 school kids are leaving primary school obese, and it's costing the NHS £11 billion a year. So we definitely need a change of approach and to grapple with this problem. Although it's a big challenge, it doesn't require huge changes in order to make a really big difference. So if we reduced our calorie intake by 50 calories a day, we'd lift over 300,000 children out of obesity and 2 million adults. If obese people consumed calories equivalent to a bottle of Coke a day less, then we'd halve obesity. And the approach we're setting out today to tackle this problem is, yes, partly about weight loss injections through the NHS.
Well, hundreds of people, Wes, hundreds of people. Okay. Hundreds of people have reported problems with their pancreas linked to taking weight loss and diabetes injections. There are health officials launching a study into the side effects. Are these jobs safe? Are you sure that this is the right way to go with your health policy, your obesity strategy?
So, firstly, it's really important that people are using this medication appropriately, and I think that's where the NHS comes in. I mean, they have gone through clinical trials and studies. They have been approved for use, but that doesn't mean that everyone listening now should just be going out and getting themselves a weight loss jab because they think they're a bit overweight and they think this is going to be a quick fix. They are designed for use in particular patient groups at particular times, and it's important people seek proper medical advice rather than just buying them off the internet. And the second thing I'd say is I think they're part of the solution to obesity, but not the only solution, which is why today we're setting out a radical new approach, working with supermarkets and retailers to just gradually and gently improve the nutritional value of the average shopping basket, working with supermarkets, using the information they have about their sales and give them the freedom actually to choose whether it's through things like price promotions, the sorts of products that they the stock, the way they do the marketing, to nudge us all gently in the right direction. And actually what I'm doing is putting an end to the nanny state and bringing in the
Many people will say this is the nanny state, Wes Streeting.
No, it's the opposite actually, because what I get lots of calls for is tax this, ban that, tell the supermarkets what they can and can't sell, where they can and put the produce. And actually what I found, supermarkets are really up for this. They want to work with us to make the nation healthy. What they've said though is we've got to do it together, and that's the approach we're taking. So I'm going to back off actually telling supermarkets how to run their businesses, because we're going to have a shared goal, shared targets for improving the health of the average shopping basket in a way that actually as consumers we won't notice. It won't make our shop more expensive. What it will do is make the healthier choice the easier choice, and that's what's so exciting about this approach.
Wes Streeting, Health Secretary, thank you for joining us on Talk. Michelle says surely the way to deal with the Glastonbury debacle is to withdraw the BBC's licence. Michelle, I don't think I do support that, but I do want an explanation as to why 40 minutes elapsed, another 40 minutes after that awful rant. Thank you to Mary in County Down as well. He says, Wes Streeting saying the crowd were on something is removing their culpability. Being drunk or high is absolutely no excuse for what happened. Mary also points out that Bob Vylan is the name of the band, which is a duo. Bobby Vylan is the singer who shouted death to the IDF. Bobby Vylan, i.e., is the drummer. They used assume names because they say they want to protect their privacy and avoid the surveillance state. Well, their privacy will be out the window if Avon and Somerset Police decided that a crime has been committed. The remarks on privacy were made to, guess where? Just have a guess. One publication that interviewed these anti-Semitic ranters. Who was it? Let's just have a think. What do you think? I'll give you no clues. Maxwell Marlowe, who was it?
Max Marlowe.
That's me.
Yep.
I'm going to put my head above parapet. Was it The Guardian?
It was The Guardian. There we are. Mystery solved. Plenty more from the Maxes after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Chris says you should have asked Wes Streeting whether the Speaker could force ministers, and especially the Prime Minister, to actually answer questions in Parliament rather than completely ignoring them. Lorraine says, I should have asked Streeting why he told Israel to get its own house in order. This is, of course, after, well, it wasn't after, but the embassy criticised the death to the IDF chants heard at the Glastonbury Festival. I thought Wes Streeting was actually pretty good and pretty straightforward. He mentioned the Nova Festival. I can't really criticise him too much. I don't think he should have said those people were drunk or high. I think that was a mistake, because they have to be culpable for what they did when they shouted back, death, death to the IDF. Otherwise, I was relatively happy with his answer, I think, on that. What did you think, Max Harrison?
No, actually, for a Labour minister, I just think it was quite succinct and whatnot, and he made some quite salient points. So yeah, I was actually quite pleasantly surprised. I should
say just another thing in Wes Streeting's defence, and then I'll stop praising a Labour cabinet minister. Not a happy position for me to be in. But my friend Lee Scott, who's going to join us later on in the programme, was an MP. Wes Streeting beat him for the seat. Lee has been in Israel. He's been in shelters. He's been dealing with his family. Huge problems. Of course, he was there for his son's bar mitzvah. Then the travel ban came in. He couldn't get out. He says Wes Streeting has actually been very helpful. So there we are. Maxwell Marlowe.
You can see why Wes is a leadership contender with that. I know, genuinely, because I think he's a principled politician. He voted against assisted dying, a matter of faith for him. He did abstain from the abortion vote, and he has previously been quite in favour of increasing access to abortions. And he gave a very principled answer, actually quite a Christian answer. Actually, I'd say. I mean, in many ways, he kind of said, it's Jesus from the cross saying, forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they have done. When we're talking about the culpability of those audiences.
I sense a however coming, and I think it might be involving your thoughts on the obesity strategy.
Yeah, OK, so Quayle Surprise, the Libertarian, is going to criticise Wes Streeting, say he's going to get rid of the nanny state. I mean, he says he doesn't want to ban things, he's trying to ban smoking. Not too sure on that. So about the obesity strategy, if I may, Peter. So he talked about the GLP-1 treatments, the jabs. That's shown to work really well, and I think obesity is a medical problem. I think trying to socialise it and politicise it through this 10-step programme that Nesta put forward, another think tank, it's not really a policy package, not really many policies, but stuff in there like banning alcohol advertising. And the reason why the supermarkets are in favour of this is because it crushes competition. And so a lot of this stuff is actually
banning alcohol advertising as well is, and I'm someone who doesn't drink, I haven't had a drink in 7 years, is going to be something which is going to push up the price of sports tickets as well.
Exactly.
Because that sponsorship is so incredibly important to sports teams.
Absolutely. It also push up probably fare tickets on TfL and transport, because guess what? Thirsty commuters coming back from the office may want to stop by the pub at the end. Advertisers know that that's what people want, and people don't mind seeing it. I thought it was very interesting, actually. ASH, Action on Smoking and Health, who are the big nanny staters who are always in and out of the Department for Health pushing for a smoking ban, have come out and endorsed the ban on alcohol advertising, and it's kind of this classic prohibitionist nanny state view that Wes Streeting, is quietly endorsing through the legislation and policies that he's pushing. So I don't entirely agree with him. I think there are some OK steps in the obesity strategy, like getting people out exercising and handing out GLP-1 treatments, but I'm really, really concerned about the way in which the nanny state is continuing to push its agenda on the British people.
Are you convinced that these jabs are safe yourself, Max?
Not myself personally, no. And that's from my own previous history with jabs, which, not a conversation from here on out. But if the government is really quite keen on trying to ensure that people are getting healthy and fitter, then stop making cuts at the DCMS. I previously sat on a sports national governing body. Trying to get funding to get people into grassroots sports and activities is getting harder and harder. So actually, let's have some personal responsibility. I agree. Stop, going hand in pocket with the supermarkets room, or actually a little bit in a cabal in this together. Actually, let's try and get people into activities. Let's actually get them to be proactive with their own health and stop putting regulation on top, because then we just get this nanny state.
Exercise is absolutely important. I get that, and people should exercise, and I should exercise far more than I do. But the point is, it's 90% food, and if Wes Streeting is bringing the supermarkets along with them, I think this is actually the first time a government has ever done that in the world. Surely that is a positive thing if you get those, the processed rubbish basically to the back. If it ends up being more expensive, perhaps. I don't want anybody to have a more expensive shopping basket, but what I do want to be cheap and accessible is the fruit and veg and the really good stuff that means that people live a healthy life.
Of course, all the processed, awful stuff which people put inside their bodies now, particularly because it's cheaper, yeah. Agree, put it at the back. But I would push back a little bit. I don't think it's 90% food. When I used to be a ballroom dancer, I used to do it once or twice times a week. Yeah, I know, I'm looking more like a belly dancer. I know, cheers. Oh, cheers, mate.
Preemptive strike.
I know, I heard that, I heard it. But like when I used to do that, it was, I could eat not some very healthy things throughout the week, but as long as I was exercising, they were going.
You were a professional ballroom dancer, weren't
you? I was, yeah, no, I was.
Turned Reform UK councillor.
I don't know, tell you, it's an interesting journey, isn't it? 20 years. But it was part and parcel. I could eat unhealthily if I was making sure that I was doing exercise. So I do think people have to have a little bit of common sense about what they're putting in and make sure that there's an output out. As long as you're doing that in an equal balance, I think you should get it.
Essentially, you're advertising for some cha-cha changes. There, really.
A couple of Cuban heels, why not?
We'll return to all of this. We'll get your thoughts on it as well. Of course, Sally's been in touch from Surrey and says that she hasn't contacted me for a while because she's been fighting the good fight with the big C. Sally, I'm so sorry to hear that, and I hope you are getting better. I hope you're on the mend. And she has nonetheless said, however, this business at Glastonbury is appalling, and worse, it's frightening. I can't believe what's happening in this country, says Sally. Sally, thank you for that message and every good wish to you. Callum's been in touch and says apparently Wes Streeting thinks there are more important issues than this hate spewed at Glastonbury. He's so unbelievably wrong. This is the filth and bile that is ruining our country. It needs to be addressed quickly and decisively, otherwise the country will inevitably descend into disorder. Labour needs to open their eyes and govern rather than following ridiculous ideologies. And Dawn in Chelmsford says there was an inevitability about the anti-Semitic bile from certain acts at Glastonbury. The fact the BBC broadcast it was also inevitable. We're in a downward spiral. Well, we'll be talking to the former BBC executive Roger Bolton a little bit later on in the programme. I wonder what he thinks about this and why there has been something that why this broadcast continued for another 40 minutes. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel. Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Martin in Loughborough has been in touch. No fan of Wes Streeting, but I thought he was spot on regarding Glasgow and Israel. He'd make a much better leader than Starmer, says Martin. Beck says, good morning, Peter. After the disgraceful chanting at Glastonbury aired by the BBC, now is the time for everyone to cancel their licence fee and boycott them. Good morning, Peter, says David. I would never take my 14-year-old Jewish daughter to Glastonbury. She is really frightened of these people. She knows it is not Israel. It's anti-Jews. Well done. If Rod Stewart does what he says, it will be like sunlight hitting vampires, says David. Keith in Ostrey says, my goodness, a Labour politician answering your questions. Who'd be a better Prime Minister than Starmer or Rayner, but we still need reform to get the country back. Brian says Wes Streeting is doing the expected political thing in this instance, distracting from the issue at hand, anti-Semitism at Glastonbury and two-tier justice by changing the subject to Ukraine. A typical politician dodging the issue, says Brian. I actually don't think he did dodge the issue. I think he developed his point. And yes, he did talk quite a lot about Ukraine, and that's maybe a little bit different to what I was asking him about, but I do think it was a reasonable comparison. I do think he hit it head on, and it's not often I say this, actually, about Labour frontbenchers, but, you know, fair dues to him. Maxwell Marlowe, who's Director of Public Affairs of the Adam Smith Institute, and Max Harrison, who's Kent County Councillor for Sheppey for Reform UK. We're talking about this. We're talking about what should happen now. What do you think should happen now, Maxwell?
In terms of Glastonbury?
Yes.
Yes. So I think...
Well, go through the three of them.
Yeah.
Bob Vylan first, then Glastonbury, then the BBC.
Yeah. Okay. So I think with Bob, let's let Avon and Somerset Police do their job, and let's see if the CPS. It's very important there because they can. So Avon and Somerset can go out, they can investigate and see whether or not a crime has been committed. If they decide to bring charges against, let's see if the Crown Prosecution Service, which of course Keir Starmer used to run, let's see if they actually file for charges and they can be prosecuted. That's if a crime has been committed. I don't know the law exactly on this issue. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. But I think they should be very proactive about what they're going to do. I think with Glastonbury, let it continue, let the people keep going. I think there should be a civil outrage about this, but I think Wes Streeting was right that we don't want to be dictating to Glastonbury who they can and can't perform. But if they choose to platform more of these, hideous views, then let's see what happens to their ticket sales. Because I don't think Middle England will put up with the amount of criticism they're getting at the moment. If this continues. Finally, the BBC, there needs to be a big internal investigation, fundamentally, on this. People like, I think it's either Nick or Robbie Gibb, one of the two who sits on...
Robbie Gibb. Sir Robbie Gibb.
Sir Robbie Gibb, a great man. I know his thoughts on this, and he's very angry, very angry.
Max?
And in terms of Bob Vylan, I think he should be charged. I think if you, like you said earlier about Lucy Connolly, the speed of which some of the investigations last summer for some of the tweets and whatnot people put out, they should be acting with immense speed right now to get him charged. In terms of, the BBC, a proper formal apology. Somebody should get the sack. We're not only to have expletives that weren't, covered and whatnot. This went on, as you said, for 40 minutes. And, in terms of Glastonbury, if they don't clamp down on this stuff going forward, we need to be looking at their licences. Done.
A BBC spokesman says some of the comments were deeply offensive, adding it had issued a warning on screen about very strong and discriminatory language. The set will not be available to watch on the iPlayer. Glastonbury says Glastonbury Festival does not condone hate speech. Sorry, that's nonsense. This is demonstrable, factually nonsense from Glastonbury Festival. Does not condone hate speech or incitement to violence of any kind from its performers. You put someone on who's on a terror charge. Case closed. Let's just remind ourselves of what the band Bob Vylan said on this is one of their members said yesterday on stage at Glastonbury.
Death to the IDF! 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 Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will.
Let's talk to Georgina in London. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Georgina, you're on with me and with Maxwell and with Max. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
I'm absolutely disgusted and gobsmacked for the fact that that person, I was going to say gentleman, but I'll refrain from that, Bob Vylan, who's very aptly named, might I add, has got away with blatant incitement of violence by what he said. Now, you don't be given a public stage, go on a stage and incite a crowd to say such obscenities. This is unacceptable. It's not the first time that the BBC has actually got away with this kind of anti-Semitism, which it seems to be a normal and regular thing nowadays. It is not acceptable in civilized society. And anyone says that, anyone who says that, oh, well, we don't know if a crime's been committed, open your eyes.
Well, this is in fairness to Avon and Somerset Police, they're saying we're aware of the comments made by acts on the Westholt stage at Glastonbury Festival this afternoon, speaking about yesterday. Video evidence will be assessed by officers to determine whether any offences may have been committed that would require criminal investigation. I mean, they're looking into it, in fairness, Georgina.
With the greatest respect, if any offences have been committed, an offence was there for all to see. That was blatant incitement of violence. This is not a good thing. Lucy Connolly, to bring it up yet again, was given a sentence of nearly 3 years for writing a tweet. Okay? The tweet was not pleasant, but she was put in prison. This man has gone on a public platform on BBC television and shouted out death to the IDF and from the river to the sea. Now, if that is not a blatant incitement of violence...
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you.
A huge crowd to do that.
And they shouted back. They shouted back, Georgina.
Exactly.
They shouted, not everybody in that crowd, but a heck of a lot of them, thousands of people, shouted back. Bob, Georgina, thank you. Bob's in Leeds. I want to get him in before the top of the hour. Bob's giving me a ring as well on 0344 499 1000. Bob, what are your thoughts on this?
Hi
there.
Peter. Great show. My late father was born in Germany, managed to get out of Germany in 1939. We're Jewish. And he told me about the situation in Germany. This situation in Glastonbury is one step away from the Nuremberg rallies that the Nazis used to hold.
Is it as serious as that, Bob, do you think, really?
I think so. We're getting to a stage where inflation is going up, whatever the government says. Unemployment is going up. People are finding it harder and harder. And we're getting to a situation that Germany was in the early 1930s. As far as it being, as far as the anti-Semitism, it's rife. If you go to any rally that are held by the Jewish community, you see the Israeli flag, yes. You see the Union flag as well. If you go to a Jewish function, the national anthem is sung. If you go to a service on a Saturday in a synagogue, there is a prayer for the royal family. How many other communities in this country do that? Look at the flags at Glastonbury. Did you see one Union flag? No.
Not that I've seen at all. I have seen one Israeli flag and one sort of large representation of the hostages' yellow ribbon, but that is completely dwarfed by the thousands of Palestinian flags. Thousands of Palestinian flags. Bob, thank you for your thoughts there this morning. I appreciate that. Glastonbury Festival says it is appalled by the actions of rap punk duo Bob Vylan on stage on Saturday, adding their chants very much crossed a line, and we are urgently reminding everyone involved in the production of the festival that there is no place at Glastonbury for anti-Semitism, hate speech or incitement to violence. Did you Google these people beforehand? Because I tell you something, I'd never heard of Bob Vylan. I Googled them yesterday and I found out that they were highly likely, I mean, of the people there. First of all, you put kneecap on. One of them's quite literally on a terror charge at the moment. But you expect us to believe, Glastonbury, that there is no place at Glastonbury for anti-Semitism, hate speech or incitement to violence. Final thought from the Maxes. Maxwell first, then Max.
I mean, it's absolutely atrocious. And, you know, if talk listeners and viewers are looking for something to do on the Sunday, I urge them to read The Paradox of Intolerance by Karl Popper, which will, I think, pose a really serious question about what we do in a liberal society when we permit people who just want to, you know, get rid of that liberalism and that heritage.
I think, you know, even when we're talking about what happened yesterday, we're seeing a normalisation of anti-Semitism in our country. This is terrifying. And even with, you know, people sort of chanting, you know, free Mo Chara, who has gone, as you know, on a terrorism charge. This is something's going on in our country, right? It is systemic. I think it's institutionalised. I think it's really, really, really worrying. There has to be a fight back of some kind, because things like this are just unacceptable. They are beyond the norms of what is allowed in politics, and I think it's absolutely dreadful.
We want to be really careful, obviously, about that, those charges that have been brought. What I think is reasonable to say, completely factually, is that when Kneecap were on stage, one of their members urged that people riot at the court. That in itself would appear to me to be incitement as well, and I wonder what the police are going to do about that. Lots to discuss. Thank you both very, very much indeed. I think that's the first time we've ever done an hour, really, on exactly the same topic with a panel, with a debate desk. So thank you both very much. There were other things we were going to talk about, but we we go with the flow on this programme. It's my show, but it's your show too. You want to talk about it. We're getting loads of messages, calls, etc. We'll get to those in the next hour. But for the meantime, I just want to say thank you very much indeed to Maxwell Marlowe, Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute, and Max Harrison, Kent County Councillor for Sheppey MP for Reform UK and former ballroom dancer as well. Lots to talk about in the next hour, of course, as well. We'll talk more about Glastonbury with Helen Whitley. She is the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. What is the Conservatives' policy on welfare? What would they do differently? We'll talk to her in just a minute. We'll get your calls and thoughts as well. 0344 499 1000.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going around that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed. Very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. And they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it a channel and say anyone who can break in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell, and the big controversy this morning is about Glastonbury and about a band there called Bob Vylan chanting "Death, Death to the IDF," an anti-Semitic rant about that. Oh, they also said from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and another anti-Semitic thing that they said will be concentrating on that. And also the welfare problems the government is having. Looks as if that bill will go through on Tuesday. What would the Conservatives do differently? Helen Whitley is the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. We'll talk to her in just a second. We spoke to the Health Secretary for the government a few minutes ago. Lots to discuss, and I want to get your views on everything today, including the government's obesity strategy. They say that not having a bottle of Coke with about 240 calories a day could solve the obesity crisis if people stop doing that. What do you think? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, and you can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, just before I speak to Helen Whitley, who is the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, I just want to remind you what happened at Glastonbury yesterday. There's a band, I'd never heard of them, called Bob Vylan. They hide behind this. They don't give their names. One of them's called Bobby Vylan. The other one's called Bobby Vylan, spelt a different way. We don't know their real names. I think we're probably going to know them fairly soon, because Avon and Somerset Police are onto them because of what I strongly believe, and my personally held belief, to be incitement of the crowd in front of them. This is what happened.
Death, death to the IDF. 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 Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
Well, Glastonbury has said they're appalled by the actions of Bob Vylan on stage. Their chants very much crossed a line, and we are urgently reminding everyone involved in the production of the festival that there is no place at Glastonbury for anti-Semitism, hate speech or incitement to violence. I would really, really love to believe them. Helen Whitley is the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. There's lots to talk about in her bailiwick. In welfare, there's a lot to talk about in terms of the problems the government are having, the Conservatives' alternative. But before we get to that, Helen, what is your reaction to this controversy at Glastonbury?
Oh, well, I think it was disgusting to see that chanting and Bob Vylan, as you described, kind of geeing up the crowds to chant that. No, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been broadcast. And one of the worst things about it is that that awful attack on Israel in October 2023, and what happened at the music festival there, where you had innocent young men and women enjoying the music. We saw rapes and murders of them. And then here at a music festival in the UK, you have that chanting and incitement saying death to Israeli soldiers defending Israel. So I think it was disgusting to see that happen.
It's also not just soldiers defending Israel, it's the fact that they have conscription in Israel. My view, and I wonder what yours is, Helen, is that this is straightforwardly against Israeli people and against Jews. It is straightforwardly anti-Semitism.
Well, that's what it seems to me. I mean, imagine if you were a Jewish person at that festival listening to that, how you do, and they clearly will have been. That must have felt horrific. I mean, clearly, I am concerned as anybody else when I see civilians in Gaza being caught up in the fighting and the deaths of children. But the fact is, Hamas is a terrorist organisation. Hamas is still holding Israeli hostages. Hamas uses civilians as human shields, and that is what people shouldn't forget that in the course of this conflict.
Yes, including 9 people who are being held hostage who were at the Nova Festival. I just wonder, Helen, what you think of the fact that not just did this act do this, but thousands of people shouted back, death, death to the IDF. Thousands of people did that at Glastonbury. There were many, many hundreds of Palestinian flags. Neither of us, I'm sure, would want to shut down any criticism of Israel or any support for the Palestinian cause if it's peaceful. The problem is that these people were shouting back the hateful, insightful claim.
Yeah, I mean, I can only hope that some of the people in that crowd last night are today reflecting what they were doing yesterday and regretting it.
Let's talk now about the welfare issue that the government is putting forward. They say they have listened to their backbenchers. They say that the policy is going forward and that the bill will almost certainly go through on Tuesday. From the Conservatives' perspective, what is your alternative to what the government is putting forward?
Well, the government is clearly in a complete shambles over welfare, and even though they have such a large majority, they can't even get quite small welfare savings through Parliament. The situation is that the welfare system isn't working. We have around 3,000 people a day now going on to sickness benefits, the bill going up to 100 billion by the end of this decade. That needs to be fixed. We have plans in our manifesto. We committed that we would save 12 billion were we in government. I've been doing work in opposition on the sorts of things that we would do in order to bring down the welfare bill, whether it's tackling the problem of assessments which are being done too much by telephone, they should be done face-to-face, or the steep rise in people claiming benefits and falling out of work for common mental health problems when you'd often be better in work. Those are some of the sorts of things that we would do. Yep. I'm afraid things that were completely missing from the government's bill that we're due to vote on next week.
Tell us what your alternative is, though, because you've talked about a little bit about what the government's got wrong. You're not telling us what the Conservatives would do. Were you, if your job title had one less word and you were the Work and Pension Secretary?
Well, in fact, as I was just saying, so, I mean, taking a step back on the welfare system, what we want is a welfare system that is fair, that supports people who really need help, people with serious disabilities who need help with the cost of their disability, some people who may not be able to work, and on the other hand a system which is affordable to the taxpayer, that's sustainable.
How are you going to achieve that though?
Where the money is spent
you're giving me your overarching view, Helen. You're giving me your overarching view, and that's fine. But how would you actually do that? Where would you get the money to do it? Where would you take the money from? What policy changes would you implement? Because it seems to me that you have a sort of broad idea, and that's fine. But what I'm not getting are the practical changes you would make.
So our view is there are much bigger savings than what Labour has put forward. Areas where you can make savings, you need to have a proper reform of the assessment process, which is identifying people whether people get help or not. Actually, one of the problems with what Labour are putting forwards is it's much more likely to mean that older people with physical disabilities don't get benefits, rather than younger people who've got a better chance of actually increasing their income. So we need to reform the assessment process. As I said, assessments need to be much more face-to-face, not over the telephone. That was something that happened because of the pandemic and a particular legal case, but that needs fixing. The other thing is tackling this steep rise in people claiming benefits, particularly PIP for common mental health disorders. And actually, the Centre for Social Justice, who we've been working with, reckons that you could save about £9 billion if you tackle that, which will give you some money which you could in fact reinvest in treatment and support for people who need it to be able to work. And we know for people in those situations that actually usually you're much better off in work than, for instance, isolated, stuck at home, and potentially if you're a young person facing a life on benefits rather than in work.
What do you make of the government's plan on obesity, which is out today? The plan is to work with supermarkets to try to get to a situation where good food that isn't processed, is cheaper. They also want to rely quite a lot on weight loss jabs in order to solve the obesity problem. What do you make of that policy?
Well, I recognise as a country we have a challenge with obesity. People are overweight, and actually the quality of diets and ultra-processed food. So this is not to say it's not a problem, but the thing that I'm really disappointed by is that we've got a government who had 14 years in opposition. They've already had a year in the job, and they're trailing in the media this morning their big 10-year plan for the NHS. And what are we hearing? Well, it's all about supermarkets hiding the crisps so you can't find them. Now, I hear from people that what they want from the NHS is they want to be able to see their GP. They want to know if they go to A&E that they'll get treated. They want to know if they're waiting for treatment that they'll get that. And what are we hearing from the government? That they're just going to try and stop you finding unhealthy food in the supermarket.
In terms of the reliance on weight loss jabs, is that something the Conservative government supports? Because there are many people in the medical community and elsewhere sounding quite a number of cautionary notes about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's early days for weight loss jabs. I'm not a clinician. Some people see them as the big answer to obesity challenge. The question is, what are the side effects for them? What I would say, as a Conservative, we do first and foremost believe in personal responsibility and supporting people to make the choices themselves about how they live their lives. Another thing, actually, which I'm shocked by the government on, is we know it's really important for kids to start off life healthily, and that's not only about food, that's about taking exercise. But one of the consequences of what the government's doing with the funding of primary schools, who are making teachers redundant, is they're also cutting back on spending on sport. Well, sport in school is really, really important to set you off on a healthy life. So the government's getting that completely wrong. And another thing, while I'm on it, is actually good quality fresh fruit and veg. I'm a Kent MP from an area where we grow fantastic fruit, but we've got the government hitting our farmers with the family farms tax. So rather than supporting fresh fruit and veg, they're trying to kill that industry.
Are you going to listen to Wes Streeting and have a few fewer chocolate buttons?
I'm not going to take my health advice from Wes Streeting, but what I would rather he was doing is, rather than telling people what to eat, is focusing on making the NHS work better.
In terms of your own party, you're languishing in the polls at 4th. The government, of course, is having a really rough time. They're facing their 1-year anniversary, but it's also the 1-year anniversary of opposition for you. I know Kemi Badenoch hasn't been leader of the Conservative Party for all that time. What has she actually achieved?
I actually think Kemi is a really good leader, and she's definitely, it feels like for us and for me working with her, like a fresh start, a focus on our principles, on why we're here, on doing the hard thinking, so that when the next general election comes, we have got an offer to the country which will fix the problems that we face. But we know that it's going to be hard for now, that we, as you said, had a huge defeat a year ago now. People were angry with us, people were angry with what happened in the tail end of our time in government. We have to listen to that, we have to reflect on what we got wrong, and we have to rebuild from this place. But what I know, the more I see of Labour and the disaster they're making of the country, particularly the economy, and we know Labour wrecks the economy, but never seen them do it so fast. And then on the other hand, Nigel Farage and Reform making promises that are just ridiculous. He's not serious about what the country
People are listening
needs.
to him.
He's
People are listening. He's riding high in the polls.
Well, they are. They are, but I mean, actually, if you see what announcements he's made, for instance, we know that the welfare state needs to be brought down under control, a bill brought down. What's he announced on welfare? Increasing welfare spend by getting rid of the two-child benefits cap. He's talked about £80 billion worth of unfunded tax cuts.
His polling numbers are more than twice yours. His polling numbers are more than twice yours.
I hear that. So that's why I'm standing here making the argument that that is not the answer for the country. And I will work really hard, along with my colleagues in the Shadow Cabinet and Kemi Badenoch as our leader, to make the argument for what the country needs, which is better government.
OK, Helen, thank you. Helen Whitley there, she's the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary for the Conservatives. What do you think of what she had to say? 0344 499 1000. Glastonbury is the thing you want to talk about. Robert is in Hertfordshire. Just before I go to him, I want to read out the full statement from Glastonbury. It's a post on Instagram. As a festival, we stand against all forms of war and terrorism. You literally have someone playing at your festival who's on a terror charge. Hasn't been convicted. There's a trial, which I don't want to prejudice, but you quite literally have someone on a terror charge who's a member of NECAP. I'll read out this nonsense. As a festival, we stand against all forms of war and terrorism. We will always believe in and actively campaign for hope, unity, peace and love. Sorry, I just need a sick bag. Hope, unity, peace and love. With almost 4,000 performances at Glastonbury 2025, there will inevitably be artists and speakers appearing on our stages whose views we do not share, and a performer's presence here should never be seen as a tacit endorsement of their opinions and beliefs. However, we are appalled by the statements made from the Westholt stage by Bob Vylan yesterday. Their chants very much crossed the line, and we are urgently reminding everyone involved in the production of the festival that there is no place at Glastonbury for anti-Semitism, hate speech or incitement to violence. There is no place at Glastonbury for anti-Semitism. There is no place. But you've booked Bob Vylan, you've booked NECAP, and there are loads of people there with banners, with flags, with hate-filled statements, shouting back, thousands of people, no condemnation by the way, of the Glastonbury festival goers who shouted back death, death to the IDF. It wasn't just this anti-Semite, this inciter of violence from Bob Vylan, from this band. It was the thousands of people shouting it back. They're the ones I'm worried about as much, if not more, as I'm worried about some idiot who wants publicity for his anti-Semitism and his hateful ways. I'll speak to Robert in Hertfordshire. Robert, apologies for the delay there. What would you like to say?
Peter, I really rate you as a journalist, but you've annoyed me a little bit, you and the media. Look, yesterday in central London, there was a For the Children march that was attended by thousands and thousands of rival football supporters and grooming victims. It was a peaceful march. It was a really hot day. And the reason that it wasn't reported on is because there was no trouble. Now you've gave all their time to this pro-Palestinian, and I won't call them by their proper name, knee tremble. I'll call them knee tremble because that's all they are, a bunch of talentless people just using the media. If the organisers of Glastonbury are serious, give some of the money to charity. Give some, you have got a responsibility as a journalist, Peter, and I rate you. There was a peaceful march yesterday. Look it up. Look how many people attended and start giving it some airtime.
I mean, I'm delighted there was a peaceful march on that matter yesterday. I didn't know about that until you told me about it, Robert.
Why didn't you know about it, Peter?
Well, I wasn't...
I'm not blaming you. I'm not having to go.
Well, I can't know everything, Robert. I can't know every single thing that goes on. But, Robert, what's interesting is that these are controversial comments that are a news story. March passes off peacefully is, sadly, not a news story.
Look, Lucy let us be, is languishing in jail for what, and for something that was done in the heat of the moment.
Do you mean Lucy Connolly? Do you mean Lucy Connolly?
Sorry. Lucy,
no worries, no worries. Yeah,
I'm getting me Lucy's mixed up.
That's all right.
Lucy Connolly is languishing in jail for something that she done in the heat of the moment. This yesterday at Glastonbury was premeditated. People should go to jail for this.
Hopefully they will. Robert, thank you for your thoughts. Appreciate that. And I'm happy to take that on the chin. If people want to tell me about stuff, I'm on Twitter. Enough people get in touch, and I love it when they do, when they're not shouting at me and calling me a, Netanyahu supporting anti-Palestinian baby killer. But when they're being reasonable, and if people want to tell me about these marches and say, we want to put a bit of publicity on your show, would you consider this? Can't fit everything in, but, knew about it only because Robert said that. Listen, lots to discuss, and we will, of course, discuss it. 0344 499 1000. Just a couple of texts before the break. What planet is Streeting on? Either he thinks that we're stupid or he is. Supermarkets want to sell food, full stop. Announcing this as a radical new approach is nonsense, says Brad in Cambridge. And Bob in Belfast says, no place for Glastonbury for hate and anti-Semitism. They literally continued to platform a hateful anti-Semite for 40 minutes after the chanting. They created and maintained the place when they could easily have stopped the concert immediately, as the BBC could have stopped the live broadcast. Absolutely right, Bob. Lots to discuss. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Sarah has been in touch from London, who says it's time for Labour to grow up, stop with student politics. They're trying to please everyone but pleasing no one, which is exactly the wishy-washy nonsense you get from students. I hope Streeting replaces Starmer. He's the only Labour MP who answers questions and the only hope we have from a Labour government. He's the only one who can also speak properly, says Sarah in London. Thank you to Jonathan in Doncaster, who says the BBC have to answer for why they continued the live stream at Glastonbury. Emily Evis, the organiser of Glastonbury, must answer for why she didn't stop the concert. She runs a hugely expensive and well-tuned security operation there. Linda's in Dorset and has some thoughts on this. Has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Linda, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, morning. I just wonder if Glastonbury should have relayed some footage of what happened on October 7th.
Or held a
so that,
vigil,
yeah,
or had a minute's silence. Yeah.
Yeah, because half those people, it's like the King's New Clothes, isn't it? They shout and scream for whatever is hyped up at the moment. They haven't got a clue what they're saying.
I worry they do, Linda. I worry they do. I worry they know exactly what they're saying. Some of them won't. Some of them will be caught up. Some people will be caught up in the moment. They shouldn't have done that. You should know what you're up to. Secondly, there are a load of people who are willfully ignorant of what they were saying because they don't want to interrogate in any way what Israel is doing, because Israel can't do anything right in their eyes. And then there are people who genuinely hate Jews. And unfortunately, there's a Venn diagram between those three groups.
Mm. But I think that should have been video footage should have been put on there. You can't have it just one way. You've got to show both sides.
Also, it's a music festival, you know, the Nova Music Festival. Even if I would have loved them to have shown the documentary, that Emmy-winning documentary, We Will Dance Again. If you haven't watched it, it's on the iPlayer. It's one of the few good things the BBC have on there. Have a look at it. Linda, I'm appalled by this. What do you think?
Well, I'm appalled as well. I think it's absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I mean, I'm an old bird now. I went to Glastonbury in, 93? Nothing like this. It was just bantered, heard of, really good stuff, no trouble. And now it's all political.
Things have changed, Linda, haven't they?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And we literally have thousands of people calling for Jewish people to be killed. And it just really worries me that's the society we have. I know Glastonbury isn't the UK, but there are loads of people who were there and endorsed this. I'm sure there are many there who don't endorse this, but it just, I don't know why you would go, Linda.
I wouldn't go now.
You wouldn't go now?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not. No, definitely not.
Linda, thanks
they're
for your...
getting away with it, though, aren't they?
Well, they are. What should happen now, do you think? What should happen now?
Well, I mean, that guy, what was his name? Bob whatever?
Bob Vylan, yeah.
He should be arrested and put in prison for inciting hatred. Kneecap, well, they're probably crossed because this Bob guy's getting more coverage than them.
Yeah. Well, I'd say they probably are. Linda, thanks very much indeed. That's Linda in Dorset there. We've got loads of voice notes and loads of callers. This is great. Keep them coming. 0344 499 1000. I promise you we'll get through as many of them as we can and talk to as many people as possible between now and 1 o'clock. Let's hear a voice note from Marge.
I think it's time to close Glastonbury down whenever it's full of hate speech. And where's our trigger warning, you know, for the fact that there's such hatred on stage? I just don't get it.
Marge, I don't want to ban Glass. I don't want to be the kind of person who bans these things, but I do want to ban people being anti-Semitic, and I do want to arrest people like Bob Vylan. So I can absolutely see where you're coming from. I totally see where you're coming from. I just hope there could be a Glastonbury that, like, even if it's a load of lefties, you know, knitting their yogurt and sitting around talking about peace and freedom and love, that's fine. Go and do that. If that's your idea of fun and you like, you know, camping and you know, chemical toilets, go ahead and do that if you want to. But it's not for me. But that's not the point. The point is that things have gone far too far. Here's another voice note.
Yeah, good morning, Peter. Great show as usual. Just on the Glastonbury chanting issues, pick whichever one you want, but I'm pretty sure one is definitely incitement to riot. Both of them, technically, surely they're hate crimes. We've got people in prison in this country for saying less. Surely, isn't it?
I wouldn't be surprised if at least some of those charges are brought. We don't know yet. Arrests haven't even been made yet. Chris has been in touch as well. He watched the BBC News last night. I actually logged on to both the BBC and Sky News to their websites, as I do every morning. I look at loads and loads of different news sites. I looked at those two early this morning. And Sky News, of course, from, you know, main story, top story in Sky News, this Glastonbury thing. BBC, well, you had to scroll down a bit. They had a Glastonbury thing in their top story. It was all about how it was amazing and how it was such an amazing time, and Pulp were there, and wasn't it wonderful? No, there's a news story here. Put it on the front page of your website. Let's hear what Chris has to say.
Hi Peter, Chris from London. I watched the BBC News last night at 11 o'clock, and the story about Glastonbury was about their 5th or 6th story down. They completely downplayed it. They said that there was some comments that had been made by people. And then to back it up, they then had 2 people they interviewed at Glastonbury who, surprise, surprise, said, oh yes, it's all about free speech and we should have this. There was no balance at all, and it was basically them saying that they condoned completely what they had broadcast.
I'm going to go back and watch that. I think I will go back on the iPlayer and watch that. And Chris, I'm sure you're accurate in terms of what you're reporting there, but yeah, I mean, this just continues. It just continues. Let's hear what Ian has to say about the interview I did a little bit earlier on with Wes Streeting about an hour ago, the Health Secretary. This is what Ian has to say.
Good morning. Wes Streeting claimed control of hate speech at Glastonbury would all be Orwellian. Well, I suggest he watches the film 1984 with a 3-minute hate by the political party in charge for Big Brother. Thank you very much. This is Ian phoning from Feltham.
Thank you, Ian. Another one on Glastonbury?
Regarding the talentless group Kneecap and their performance at Glastonbury, who are riding the wave of publicity, I think the BBC knew exactly what they were doing. I think Glastonbury organisers should pretty well just hang their heads in shame. They're supposed to run a music festival, not a political rally, and I think they should all be brought to account.
In fairness to the BBC, they didn't show Kneecap live. They didn't do that. There was a live stream of all the different stages at Glastonbury. There are quite a few stages, and what happened was they didn't do Kneecap live. So I'll slightly be in their corner on that one. Final one from Judy.
Good morning, Peter. It's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. If that chappie that were inciting violence at Glastonbury yesterday is not arrested and given 3 years in prison, just like Lucy Connolly, there's something very wrong with the political system. We will know for sure that Lucy Connolly is a political prisoner. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Lots to discuss. We're going to continue doing that throughout the programme. Next guest is Roger Bolton. He's a former BBC executive and presenter. We'll also talk to Ben Habib. He's coming up very soon, the chairman of the Great British Political Action Committee, former deputy leader of Reform UK. They're both important guests, and I'm glad they're on the show today. But even more important is your voice. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to let me know your thoughts. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots to discuss. Thank you so much for your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. And thank you to Leslie. Some thoughts on child obesity. She says, whose responsibility for that if there's an increase in child obesity? Is it the supermarkets? Is it the government? Or shock horror, the parents? Another one from Mike in Colchester. It says, many of those people who are obese will be on benefits because this is preventing them from working rather than giving them their cash benefits, which they can spend on highly calorific processed food. How about giving them vouchers that can only be spent on fresh food? Great show, says Mike in Colchester. Well, thank you for that. Gary in Bolton says, let's see if Starmer accuses Vylan and the idiots in the crowd as jumping on a far left bandwagon. An interesting point, but in fairness, Wes Streeting I thought was pretty straightforward, pretty unequivocal in his thoughts on that. Spoke to him a little bit earlier on, the Health Secretary. I want to speak now to Roger Bolton. He's a former BBC executive and presenter, and in a minute or two I'm going to speak to Ben Habib, who's chairman of the Great British Political Action Committee. Roger, We've been talking about this from the position that it is pretty straightforwardly awful. What should the BBC have done? Because what happened was this vile rant from this Vylan, Bob Vylan artist happened, and then for a further 40 minutes he was allowed to be on stage. Should the BBC have shown that?
Well, this is a great difficulty. I don't think they should, but the question is, were they informed or had they reason to believe beforehand that the band would behave in this way? You see, all their attention was on, as you will know, came from Northern Ireland, this other group from Northern Ireland, NECAP, who they were worried about, and they agreed there not to carry them live, but to use only edited highlights. In other words, it would give the BBC the opportunity of editing out anything that they thought they should not transmit. The problem with this one is it was a live feed. Now, there are lots of live feeds, it should be said. I mean, there's so many going on. This is not BBC One, this is not BBC Two, this is a live feed available. I don't know how many thousands would have watched it.
Well, now, but what has happened now, Roger, is that millions of people have seen that clip, and surely, if you're a BBC producer, with Glastonbury, they have quite literally hundreds of people working on their extensive coverage of this, and I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. Lots of people want to watch it, that's fine. Lots of people say they get licence fee value from doing so and other things the BBC does. My point is that surely you would be hypersensitive, you would be researching every single act that goes on, and we're in a position where Bob Vylan was put on by Glastonbury. I don't think they should have done that. But the BBC, after the rant, kept it going for 40 minutes. They didn't cut the feed.
Oh, well, they should have done, shouldn't they? And the key question, which I don't know the answer to, is that, you know, what is Bob Vylan's record in this area? You know, have they got?
Well, I did a quick Google. Roger, and there's quite a lot of activism there. He wasn't going to come on, or the two people who are part of this band weren't going to come on and say, "Isn't it lovely to be here? Let's play some music."
Yeah. There's a difference between activism and what they did, and which the police, by the way, are now investigating. So we better be a bit careful about what we say.
I don't think we need to, because charges haven't been brought. I think you can say what you want.
All right, well, it's revolting. I think the other thing, though, let's look at it in a wider picture. This is a propaganda gift to the Israeli propaganda machine, just as if it had gone the other way, it would be a gift to those.
Why are you deflecting, Roger? I don't understand. I mean, can't you just straightforwardly agree with me that this is, which you have, you said it's revolting, but I mean, it's not about Israeli propaganda, is it?
Oh, no, hold on, it is. Because what happens, when this happens, this goes out, and very, very few people will have seen this, by the way, originally, immediately you get these statements, in this instance, because there's a propaganda war going on, from the Israeli side, attacking it, and it's a gift to them. Because
isn't it perfectly reasonable to attack it because it is, as you said, revolting?
As long as people are well aware what's going on, there's a propaganda war.
Why is it propaganda? Why is it propaganda to simply say this anti-Semitism is wrong? No matter where it comes from, Roger.
No, you're misunderstanding me. I'm saying there's a propaganda war going on, and then people seize from either side on whatever incident occurs and magnifies it in their own interests. Now, the audience just wants to be aware of that. Doesn't excuse remotely what the band did, which was disgusting. Doesn't excuse the BBC from not acting more effectively and efficiently, and quickly. It does mean that you should understand what's going here. That this is, what was the band up to? Was the band deliberately naive? Because they're certainly naive and more than that, what they said. Or were they just trying to get publicity, in order to become more prominent?
Maybe they just hate Jews.
Well, I don't know.
Well, I think you probably do hate Jews, Roger, if you say death to the IDF. I don't think...
No, hold on. You've got members of the Israeli government, like Ben Motrick and Ben Gavir, talking about the Palestinians as animals. So, if
you say death to the IDF, that's a lot worse, and also it's a conscriptive...
No, hold on, I'm not sure. Listen, what's going on here is a terrible conflict with...
Hold on, Roger, hold on. No, Roger, I want to...
You're trying to narrow it down. I'm telling you that one of the fundamental problems here is no independent journalist can get into Gaza. And they can't report on what's happening. What is also going on there, we know, is very large numbers of people are being killed. Now, Israel is also under attack. It's a complicated situation in which a pop group, which doesn't know much about it, has got involved. Let us be very careful not to overblow this. Let us be very careful also to be aware that different sides will be using it for propaganda purposes. And let's focus down on the two key issues, which are, should the BBC have known that what this band was going to do? I don't know. The second thing is, should they have acted more quickly to take them off there? Yes, they should. But let's get it in proportion.
Okay, I want to engage with your point about what you call the Israeli propaganda machine. I mean, the point is, if you highlight something and you say someone chanting death, death to the IDF, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter if it's the Israeli embassy. It doesn't matter if it's Benjamin Netanyahu. That's not propaganda. That is simply pointing something out, which is, as you said, revolting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well, why have you talked about Israeli propaganda then?
No, because what I'm saying is that for example, but what it is you search, if you're if you're very partisan in this, and it applies obviously to both sides here, is you seek out the fact which is most advantageous to your cause, and you push it as hard as you can so it's in the headlines. You try and minimize the attention to those things which will show you in a bad light. What I'm saying is there is a propaganda machine, and actually Danny Cohen runs his chair of, who you may have known, former director of TV, is chair of one so-called media monitoring unit. There is another one on the Palestinian side doing the same thing. And what they do is they try and focus only on one thing, which most advantageous to their cause. Meanwhile, if you looked at the other side, and you look, for example, at the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, because there's very good internal debate in Israel, better than we have here. Haaretz is saying, for example, that IDF soldiers have told them that they've been told to shoot civilians.
Okay, IDF soldiers, I think we need to be really clear that they are, I'm not denying that Haaretz has said that the Israeli government has denied it and said that it's wrong. What you also got to remember about the IDF is that there are conscripts to that. They're essentially all Israeli young people, or almost all Israeli young people are there, and they are not responsible for what people like Ben Gvir says.
No, they're not, but it is a responsibility. But if people of your cabinet tell you that you're dealing with animals, and if your officers do not exercise very tight control, scared young men will shoot. That's a fact. Now, I'm not saying in this either which side is right. I'm saying understand the context of it, understand that there's a propaganda war, but yes, there's a fundamental question to the BBC of what did they know beforehand and why didn't they act sooner?
But you talked, Roger, about you talked, Roger, about overblowing this. There were thousands of people screaming for Jews to be killed yesterday. British people at a festival shouting about Jews being killed. You can't overblow this.
Hold on. I'm appalled by anti-Semitism. It is dreadful. It is a stain on Western Europe, on the churches that have partly been responsible. It is an appalling thing. But let's also not be unaware that the Netanyahu government tries to call all criticism of Israel anti-Semitic. Now, what did
if you say death to the IDF and you say from the river to the sea, that is anti-Semitic, Roger?
Hold on. It's not necessary to say death to the IDF because people would say it the other way. Yes, if you say...
I don't care if they say it the other way, they're wrong. The IDF are Israelis who are young people. It is basically every young person. You're not talking about...
No, but hold on. What you have done earlier, and I don't know, you may be right, but I don't know this. You said they were saying death to the Jews.
Well, they weren't saying death to the Jews, but that is essentially what they're saying if you're calling for IDF soldiers to be killed. You're also saying... let me finish, Roger. Let me finish. They're also saying... Well, let me finish, and then I'll let you finish. They also said from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That is about destroying and the destruction of the only Jewish nation in this world.
Let's separate the two things. The first is, it's not, if you're saying death to Israelis, which is disgusting, it is not the same as saying death to Jews. There is a difference, and I've tried to point out that this present Israeli government wants to try and give the impression there isn't a difference. When it comes to the second point, which is what you say, it's absolutely right. It's in Hamas's former founding document, the elimination of the State of Israel, and that is anti-Zionist, and that is something I couldn't be part of. I believe that the State of Israel has a right to exist. But you have to distinguish between being anti-Israeli government, this particular government, and you may be genuinely concerned about the level...
As many Israelis are. It is a distinction
I've tried to point out. But I've also pointed out, when you're dealing with this, you've got a propaganda operation, on the whole working on behalf of the Netanyahu government, which does not want you to draw a distinction between anti-Israeli and
But are you saying that the Israeli embassy should not raise concerns about Jew hate in the UK?
No, but I say you should be very clear about what they're doing. They're promoting the interests of their government. All embassies do that.
By raising concern about Jew hate in the UK?
No, because of the language used. Now, look, there are what, at least 55,000, and Israelis' intelligence don't disagree with it, have been killed in Gaza.
Those are Hamas figures. I don't agree with them. I don't believe Wikipedia, and I don't believe terrorists.
On that. Let's not lose sight of that. Let us be disgusted by what is said at Glastonbury. Let us be appalled by the way in which it was applauded by some people. Let us be critical of the BBC for not picking up on this sooner and ask questions to them. But don't let this dominate a wider discussion about what's going on.
Roger, thank you. That's Roger Bolton there, former BBC executive and presenter. Ben Habib is with me. I found that a slightly astonishing interview, to be honest. Ben Habib is chairman of the Great British Political Action Committee. Ben, what do you make of what Roger said there?
Well, it was very interesting listening to him. I mean, he clearly understands the line that he should be taking, but he finds it challenging to take the line. And this isn't a nuanced debate about, two powers going to war against each other. This is a proscribed terrorist group having attacked Israel when it was without any provocation whatsoever, killing thousands of women and children, ironically, as it happens, at a music festival. Many of them were killed at a music festival. And the whole narrative that there's nuance in this, that Israel has done awful things and that we need to see this in a balanced way, misses the fundamental issue here, which is that Israel is a democratically settled state that had a horrific, unprovoked attack against it on the 7th of October 2023. And it had to respond in the way that it has responded because Hamas is embedded in the populace right across Gaza. And any war in Gaza was bound to be of the kind of nature that it has been. And by the way, people like me and others, and I'm sure you, Peter, as well, and many, many more, on the 7th of October knew exactly what was going to follow. We all knew this was now going to lead to a great number of deaths. And Hamas knew that. Hamas knew that they were going to draw the ire, justified ire.
They don't care about their people. They don't care about what their people.
That's the point I was getting to.
Yeah,
they
absolutely. They want the casualty numbers to be high. They want this propaganda.
They want this kind of nuanced nonsense debate. And the other thing you touched on it in passing is that the BBC has been quoting Hamas figures as if they're absolutely the truth. And they've also been quoting UNRWA, members of which, the UN Relief and Workers Agency, members of which had actually participated in the 7th of October attack.
Correct, that's factual.
The BBC won't term Hamas as a proscribed terrorist group. It talks about Hamas. It doesn't talk about terrorists. That's what they are. They're terrorists, Hamas. But the thing that really depresses me, I mean, we get lots of ills going on across the world all the time, innocent people being killed in large numbers all the time. What really depresses me is that the United Kingdom has ended up in a place where constitutionally we see this kind of thing happening at what should be a peaceable music festival where young people go to let down their hair, have a laugh. And as much as I used to detest my children going there 10, 15 years ago, I tell you what, I wouldn't let my children go there now. I found it horrific that they didn't wash for whatever period of time they were there. They rolled around in mud and they behaved like animals. Now, I mean, they're being indoctrinated at Glastonbury. It's terrible.
The thing that worries me, Ben, I've said this before in the programme today, is not just this band who are saying this. It's the thousands of people who are chanting it back.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a divided society. That divided society in many respects has its heart in multiculturalism and diversity, equity and inclusion, the protective blanket that we've given to foreign cultures that have come to this country. We have literally nursed into being the divisions that you saw at Glastonbury, and we give a protective blanket to it. That is precisely what our legislative and regulatory framework has done, coupled with mass immigration. It is a travesty. I wouldn't have had kneecap. If I were an organizer at Glastonbury, I wouldn't have had kneecap playing. This is, they flirt with how they what their view is with the IRA.
Glastonbury says I'll just read you what they say. As a festival, we stand against all forms of war and terrorism. The chants by Bob Vylan are very much crossed a line, and we are urgently reminding everyone involved in the production of the festival that there's no place at Glastonbury for anti-Semitism, hate speech or incitement to violence. Do you believe them, Ben? Do you believe them?
Well, clearly not. I mean, the evidence, I believe the evidence more than I believe that declaration. A declaration is only meaningful if it's enacted. But, you know, kneecap, I mean, I've got to be careful what I say, but there is close to endorsing the IRA without endorsing the IRA. And
there are IRA terrorist apologists. I'm happy to say it. We'll not talk about the court case or the charges there, Ben. Just very finally and briefly, if you wouldn't mind, what should happen now?
Well, I think there should be sanctions against Glastonbury. I think this Bob Vylan guy should be taken to task by the by law enforcement, and so should kneecap for what they were advocating at that festival.
Ben, thank you. That's Ben Habib there, Chairman of the Great British Political Action Committee. More reaction to this, and we're going to check in with my friend Lee Scott. He's back from Israel. He's safe. I spoke to him for 5 consecutive days when he was there. He was in shelters with his wife and indeed his grandchildren. His grandson had his bar mitzvah. They went out when things were peaceful. Then the war with Iran started. Lee broke his arm in an attack. There were shells coming near him. We'll check in with him because he's much better now and he has a few things to say. We'll hear what they are in just a second and get your reaction to all of this. 0344 499 1000.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi Peter, says Peter in Croydon. I would encourage everyone to make a complaint to the BBC about Bob Vylan. They have a dedicated complaints page. It's really easy. I have. Another person says, isn't this another reason to abolish the TV licence? Great show, that's Darren. Another person, an anonymous person, says, I'm ashamed to say I worked for the BBC for many years when Roger Bolton was a senior editor and highly regarded leader, particularly for his wise and brave editorial decisions, clear-headed journalism and integrity, all of which were lacking in that astonishing interview you just did, Peter. His immediate rush early in the interview to invoke the so-called Israeli propaganda machine was both disgraceful and very telling. His pathetic attempt to deflect and minimise was shameful, but he is, unfortunately, very representative of the thinking and stance of many current BBC and other mainstream media leaders and staff. This Friday marks 1 year since Labour's landslide election victory. To commemorate the occasion, Talk has put together a 1-hour special looking back at Keir Starmer's first 12 months in Downing Street. The title of this, I think, perhaps tells you our thoughts on it, and I am actually part of this. I was interviewed the other day. It's going to be out at 9 o'clock on Friday evening. 1 Year of Chaos is the name of the programme. It's airing on Friday. That is, of course, the 4th of July. 1 year on for Keir Starmer and indeed for Kemi Badenoch, actually. Not the whole time, but for certainly the Conservatives in opposition. So that's 1 Year of Chaos. Friday, 9 o'clock here on Talk. Let me know your thoughts on all these matters. 0344499 1000. I want to talk to Lee Scott now. Lee is a former Conservative MP. He's a really good mate of mine. He's a guy who was in Israel. He went when things were peaceful. Then the Iran conflict broke out. He was caught up in all of it. And you may remember that Lee and I had a series of phone calls over actually a number of programmes that I did. I think we spoke maybe 5 or 6 times. And now, Lee, you're back in Essex.
I am, Peter, and delighted to be so back in Essex.
The only way is Essex. You did tell me you were going to kiss the ground when you got back to Birmingham. Did that happen? Is there photographic evidence?
No, Peter, there isn't. We got back in the early hours to Birmingham, and it wasn't necessarily quite appropriate for me to disrupt the crowds kissing the grounds, but metaphorically I kissed the ground. And my gratitude to the RAF and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office.
So you went on the RAF flight. I mean, it took quite a long time to come. You finally back, but of course you're still you're injured in one of those attacks. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, I got pushed and hit my elbow on a concrete bridge sheltering from a missile attack. And in my normal way, as you know, Peter, I said, it'll be fine. It hurts a bit. And when I actually got it checked out, the doctor said to me, "When did you pass your medical degree? It's broken."
Can you show it to us for those who are watching? If it's painful to lift up, don't lift it up. But no, gosh, okay. you got your plaster on there.
Yeah.
Lee, you've had a really, really rough time. It must feel good to be back. But I'm sure your thoughts are with your family in Israel as well.
Look, although obviously the ceasefire of Iran is vitally important, the family in Israel have still had to have missiles coming in from the Houthis in Yemen. They haven't stopped, and it sort of goes on. It's sort of never ending. I take my hats off to them. I couldn't live my life like that, Peter. I really couldn't.
You did live your life like that for quite a number of days. You were in those shelters. It must have been incredibly tense, and I know you had trouble sleeping, and it was just a very... Oh. Hello, Lee, are you with us? I think we've lost Lee there. I think we've got a sense, certainly, of what Lee was saying there. He's back in the UK, which is great. He's safe. His arm will heal, and it's broken, but he will be okay, which is great. And I'm just delighted that my friend is back. And of course, he and I are thinking about all our Israeli viewers and listeners as well. There's a lovely woman called Natalia who occasionally writes to me on Twitter, and I just want to say hello to her and her family. I know that it is still a tough time. It is a very tough way to live, and Natalia and your family, where I know she has a son, we're thinking about you and everybody else who is in that region in the Middle East who's watching and listening at the moment. It is a tough time and continues to be so. Back here in the UK, of course, we're talking about Glastonbury, and we're talking about the controversy over not kneecap, which is what I thought I'd be talking about today. We're talking a little bit about that, but actually Bob Vylan. Let's just remind ourselves what this particular band said and did at Glastonbury yesterday.
Death to the IDF! 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 Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
Well, I found myself actually part of Kneecap's introductory video, as did Kevin O'Sullivan, actually, because this particularly horrific individual, this villain, Bob Vylan person, who was on afterwards, after his set, Kneecap came on, and they ran a little montage of people who have slagged them off. And Kevin O'Sullivan and I were part of that. Let's have a look at how I became a Glastonbury star.
We have seen great progress since we gathered here a year ago.
Kneecap.
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 Kneecap is pretty disgusting.
A band I've never even heard of.
There we are. So they played that. That was on the main stage, and in fact, there was someone I know who was at Glastonbury who messaged me about it. So always good to get under the skin of people like Kneecap, who are apologists for the IRA terrorism campaign and should cease and desist from their horrific, hate-filled music immediately, in my opinion. Mark says, what a brilliant show today. I'm beyond angry at the Glastonbury BBC situation. I now look forward to the Glastonbury Festival goers leaving early, loudly proclaiming not in my name. Unfortunately, I think not. And good, Mark praises the coverage of this issue. That is Mark in Devon there, and thank you for that. Another one from Martin in Berkshire. He says, Glastonbury said they were shocked by what happened. Just look at the video screens beside the stage. They knew what was going on. I think they're shocked in retrospect, perhaps. Let us know what you think about all of this. Dame Louise Elman's coming up in just a second. She will have a perspective on it. 0344 499 1000.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar. Hello, and lady. Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Between now and 1 o'clock, we're going to be concentrating on the story that is dominating our show today. It's what happened at Glastonbury yesterday. A band called Bob Vylan, one of its members who hides behind a cloak of anonymity, I'm not sure that's going to last, quite frankly, chanted out, "Death, death to the IDF," and his thoughts that from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, both anti-Semitic things. We will talk to Dame Louise Elman, former Labour MP and one of the vice chairs of the Jewish Leadership Council, in just a second about this. Lord Wolney is coming up as well, who advised the government on political violence. We'll also talk this hour about pubs, and I know that pubs are really important to so many people, including me, and they are places where communities come together. Well, one pub landlord says they're disappearing. He's spoken to us before, he's going to speak to us again about a great article that he's written. In fact, he may even be writing a book about the death of the pub. Lots of reaction to what he was saying previously. Let us know your thoughts on all these matters. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note. Please make them less than a minute, otherwise Tech Up Dave shouts at me. Less than a minute, please. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with me here on Talk. Well, Bob Vylan is a band I'd never heard of yesterday. We've certainly heard of them now because they went on the stage at Glastonbury and chanted this.
Death, death to the IDF! 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 Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
The thoughts of Bob Vylan there, and it wasn't just him chanting that. There were thousands, literally thousands of people at Glastonbury who were chanting it back. Avon and Somerset Police say we're aware of the comments made by acts on the West Holts stage. That's one of the stages at Glastonbury Festival. Video evidence will be assessed by officers to determine whether any offences may have been committed that would require a criminal investigation. Well, do you know what? I've kind of done the assessment for you, Avon and Somerset Police, in the last couple of minutes. Pretty clear to me what happened, pretty clear to me what the law is, pretty clear to me what you should do now. Don't hang around, get in gear, have the investigation, arrest these people, arrest that person, and perhaps some of the people chanting back as well. I look forward to the people leaving Glastonbury, renouncing it, saying they'll never go again because they don't want to be associated with those sorts of people and a festival that would put them on. So they put them on before Kneecap. I thought we'd be talking a lot more about Kneecap today. Kneecap are the Northern Irish rappers, one of whom is on a terror charge, who were at Glastonbury yesterday as well. This set was put on before them. And after that, after what you just saw and heard there about death to the IDF, for another 40 minutes, 40 minutes, Bob Vylan was on. Now, why did the BBC not cut the feed? Why did Glastonbury security not intervene? Why did the organisers of Glastonbury not intervene? Let's hear what the BBC have said. They say it says some of the comments were deeply offensive, adding it had issued a warning on screen about very strong and discriminatory language. The set will not be available to watch on the BBC iPlayer. Well, they platformed this person, they showed footage of this person for another 40 minutes. I do wonder if Bob Vylan had said, I don't know, death to black people, death to gay people, death to Muslims, for example, would the BBC have continued to show him shouting death to the IDF? I do wonder. And of course Glastonbury says, I mean, just listen to this. A post on Instagram said, as a festival we stand against all forms of war and terrorism. You've literally put someone on your stage who is up on a terrorism charge at the moment. You've done that. That's literally what you've done. I'm not having any comment on that. I don't want to prejudice a trial. Factually, there is someone in Kneecap, factually, who is facing a terrorism charge at the moment. You have, factually, Glastonbury and Emily Evis put that person on a stage. As a festival, we stand against all forms of war and terrorism. We will always believe in and actively campaign for hope, unity, peace and love. With almost 4,000 performances at Glastonbury in 2025, there will inevitably be artists and speakers appearing on our stages whose views we do not share, and a performer's presence here should never be seen as a tacit endorsement of their opinions and beliefs. However, we are appalled by the statements made from the West Holt stage by Bob Vylan yesterday. Their chants very much crossed the line, and we are urgently reminding everyone involved in the production of the festival that there is no place at Glastonbury for anti-Semitism, hate speech or incitement to violence. That's just nonsense. That's just nonsense. Absolute nonsense. You booked these people. You kept them on the stage. You probably knew what they were going to say. They have form. Kneecap have form, they have form. Bob Vylan, Google them. It took me 30 seconds to find out the kind of people Bob Vylan were. You knew who they were at Glastonbury. Just don't gaslight us. Don't give us this bile and this nonsense, and don't patronise us, because it's all total nonsense. Let's speak to Dame Louise Elman, who is a former Labour MP and Vice Chairwoman of the Jewish Leadership Council, one of the Vice Chairs of that council. Louise, thank you for joining me today. there are people saying, oh, this is free speech and this is artistic license and this is someone who is a performer and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's nonsense, isn't it?
Yes, the Glastonbury organisers say the festival is about unity, peace and love. There wasn't much of that yesterday, was it, on stage? And it was chilling to watch a crowd being worked up on what is simply hate speech and shouts to kill, 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 hate speech. And it's coming at a very, very volatile time. And this is hate speech specifically towards Jewish people on the public platform, broadcast to the nation. And it's at a time when there's a great deal of concern within Jewish communities and people are feeling very vulnerable. There is a very high level of anti-Semitism going on and people are feeling extremely worried about the whole situation. I think it's absolutely appalling that that happened yesterday.
Louise, I don't think you're going to get through to Bob Vylan. I don't think any of us are really going to get through to that absolute hate-filled person who shouted that yesterday. What is your message to people who shouted it back?
I think people should think about what they're doing and not allow themselves to be used as tools, not to be worked up into a frenzy of hate. And people go to a festival to enjoy themselves. They do go looking for peace and love. That's what it's all about. But they should listen to the message too and not allow themselves to be used in this way.
They're not just head up in this, though. They're not just, it's not as if you sort of taken away in the moment and caught up in the moment. I mean, there are lots and lots of people there waving Palestinian flags, not because they care, as you and I do, about the civilians in the Palestinian territories, especially Gaza, who want them to live a life free from Hamas terrorism and from bombing from Israel, because we both want the war to be over, but because they support what Hamas have done and are doing.
Yes, I mean, they're putting themselves into a position where they are presumably supporting the murder and the killings of Hamas. And of course, one of the horrendous things that happened now nearly 2 years ago was at a music festival, the Nova Music Festival, Hamas murdered, raped, mutilated, kidnapped over 300 young people who had simply gone to enjoy a music festival. So there is a horrible irony in this. And the organisers at Glastonbury do bear some responsibility. The prime responsibility has to be that of the performer, who presumably knew exactly what he was doing, and the law should be looking at the actions of the performer.
Glastonbury kept Bob Vylan on stage for 40 minutes. They did not stop the performance. They did not intervene. The BBC continued to show this performer for 40 minutes after this was said. What do you think of that?
The BBC were wrong, and they should be brought to account for what they've done too. They could see and hear exactly what was happening. This didn't come out of the blue. There were warnings before the performance of what could happen, but yet they allowed it to not just carry on, but they continued to broadcast it, and that was very wrong. I think that everybody has a responsibility, and we should always remember this isn't about a political opinion. It's not about the Palestinian cause. There are many supporters of the Palestinian cause who do believe in peace and don't want hate and don't want murder, but this was a call for hate in a very volatile situation where Jewish communities feel very vulnerable. And it's not just about Jewish communities, it's about the country as a whole. We don't want this division, we don't want this hate, we want our community to stay together.
Louise, thank you. A lot of sense spoken there by Dame Louise Elman, former Labour MP and Vice Chair, one of the Vice Chairs of the Jewish Leadership Council. Quite a lot of people getting in touch on all of this. Sarah says Glastonbury is meant to be a music festival. It's been hijacked, as everything else in this country has been, without consequences. Don't see them shouting down Hamas. I don't see them shouting down Khomeini. It seems that it just is Israel the whole time. They can do nothing right for Jewish people in this country. It feels unfair and dangerous, says Sarah. Kevin says, I think the likes of Rod Stewart and other performers should cancel Glastonbury. That will send out a big message to them and to all of them. Let's see actually on, again, the BBC this morning, which did not cover this as a main story on their website. It was on the website, but it wasn't a main story. And in fact, I went on the BBC website this morning, as I often do, went on the Sky News website. Sky News front and centre, huge riot at Glastonbury, Bob Vylan, loads of people commenting, loads of MPs commenting, loads of people commenting. Huge story, first story, live feed, all the rest, or a live blog, all the rest of it. BBC wasn't the main story. Wasn't the main story. It's the 5th or 6th, as one of our people on Voice Note said. They were watching the news last night. I didn't see the BBC News last night. I think I'll go back and watch it and see how they covered it. But this morning, certainly, there was some coverage of what Rod Stewart said. Now, he told the Times yesterday that he believes that Nigel Farage should be given a chance, that he doesn't believe in the Conservatives anymore. He'd previously been a Conservative supporter. There was some debate on that on the BBC this morning. This is what was said. And look, just look how the interviewer handles it. Does he intervene? Does he say anything? No.
And if you're going to go and see Rod Stewart do the Legend slot today?
I'm slightly worried about Rod Stewart because he's come out reform, hasn't he? And
I don't support reform.
No. I think there might have been some
Boycott Rod Stewart.
I think there might have been some sort of mix-up because I think it's that guy Charlie from Pimlico Plumbers has replaced Rod Stewart. So Rod Stewart's currently in Malaga, and Charlie from Pimlico Plumbers is on the stage. So it's a no for me.
Washed-up comedian Dom Jolly there on the BBC slagging off Rod Stewart for supporting Reform UK. The person beside him, I don't know who she is, but she was interviewed as well. The interviewer didn't challenge that at all, just said at the end of it, oh, there's been quite a lot of controversy of this, classic wishy-washy nonsense, letting the message go out there and no challenge to it whatsoever. And just Dom Jolly there just criticising, saying he's worried about Rod Stewart. And so it goes on. Let's go to a call from Israel. Leon is with us now. Leon, thanks for the call. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Great to talk to you, by the way. And I've been spreading the word for talk radio.
Thank you.
All round.
It's very kind.
Yeah, no problem. I was fuming when I heard that Roger Bolton talking from the BBC. Absolutely disgusting. And people like him always bring up Haaretz, the paper, which is far, far left-wing, anti-Israel paper that you can ever get. And that's why they always bring that one up. They never bring any other paper up. And one of the things you took away from me, because I was going to say, can you imagine if it was a Jewish singer singing about death to the Gazans or death to the Palestinians? I think the police would have been called then and there, as I've seen Jewish people on peaceful marches being taken away because the police are worried that they may have a riot on their hands from the thousands of pro-Palestinian marching.
Well, it's interesting because NECAP actually said yesterday that they wanted a riot at the court case. Now, we'll be very, very careful about this because there are charges.
I heard that, yeah.
Yeah, of course. But certainly, Leon, it's not good. I mean, how does it feel to you watching from Israel? I know you have lived in this country as well. You're
Yeah, actually, quick rundown. I'm 80 years old. Born and lived in England all my life.
Yeah.
62 years. I've been here 18 years.
Okay.
My family's out here.
How's it been in the last few weeks, Leon? You've had a rough time with the rockets coming in. Have you been in shelters?
Yeah. My family, my sons, my grandchildren. I think you would know the kibbutz near Oz, who was very badly affected by the 7th of October. My poor grandchildren had 20 funerals alone to go to of their friends.
So awful.
One, changing the subject, one of my, because I mean, I could go on and on. Sorry about.
That's okay. Well, Leon, thank you so much.
One other thing, just one other thing.
Go ahead, Leon.
I was speaking to one of Arab Israeli, one of my friends, Arab Israeli is, and we were actually talking about this because I had it all over my Facebook page this morning about Glastonbury. He's never heard of it, and I was explaining to him. And you know, the sad thing is, his son is serving in the IDF.
Yeah.
As an Israeli Arab, and you can't imagine how disgusted he was when he heard that guy. I'll call him a guy. I'd like to call him something else, but
I think we probably both would. But I know exactly what you mean, Leon.
But thank you for letting me on, Peter, and keep up the good work, all of you there. I think your show is wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks.
Please keep up the good work, and thank you very much indeed for taking my...
Leon, thank you for your call. I'm so sorry to hear about what has happened to you and your country and the whole region in the last while. It sounds just really tough. I'm sorry to hear about those funerals as well. It just brings home 20 funerals of the over 1,000 people, 1,400 or so people who were murdered on the 7th of October. Many, many more innocent people losing their lives since. I will shed absolutely no tears for Hamas terrorists who have died. Kneecap have posted a photo on their Instagram stories of them with the actor Jamie Dornan, the Northern Ireland actor. What on earth was he doing partying with them? What on earth was he doing giving them the time of day? Jamie, you know, I've had some respect for you previously. I have absolutely no respect for you now. Just appalling. Just absolutely appalling. 50 Shades of Stupid. Stay with us here on Talk.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi Peter, says Leslie, it will be interesting to see how the vote next week prescribing a Palestine action, how many MPs like Richard Bergen vote against it. Well, interesting as you mentioned Richard Bergen. I'd almost forgotten about him actually. It was less than 48 hours ago that I interviewed Richard Bergen, the Labour MP. I asked him, do you remember Palestine Action? Do you remember the RAF Bryce Norton? In fact, there were more arrests there in the last 48 hours on that. RAF Bryce Norton, they broke in, they sabotaged planes, and I asked Richard Bergen, Member of Parliament for Leeds East, should we, would he like to condemn that? he would not. I said, was it right or wrong? He didn't say either one of those things, which I think perhaps speaks volumes. Let's speak to Sue in the New Forest about what on earth is going on at the moment. Sue, you're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
What would you... All right. I was really chilled this morning when I heard that about Glastonbury, about the chanting. I'm a 78-year-old lady, and I was a 1960s Dolly Bird. And, of course, we had a lot of protests going on at those days, but nothing like this, nothing like this. The only time I've ever heard anything like this is I was born just after the war. And, of course, we can remember hearing the Hitler chants and all this sort of thing. All these things going on in the late 30s before the war started. And this is how everything started, with this terrible, terrible chanting. I know the Jews have always had a bad time. I mean, right, go back to medieval days in England, and they were thrown out and terrible things were done to them. It was only in latter years that they were allowed back into Britain.
How do we get a grip of this, Sue? How do we get a grip of this? How do we say... we've got to. The police are investigating this particular person. I think investigations need to be put into many of the people who are on screen chanting this back. But if we just take a step back for a second, I mean, how we've got here as a society is just horrendous. But what do we do now? How do we get back at this? How do we get a sense of unity and stop people being?
It has really gone so far, but, when you look back to the days of Arafat, that was his name, wasn't it? The Palestinian leader. And at one time, they were all the time wanting to have their homeland. And I absolutely agree that they should have the homeland. And I didn't like the fact that, Israel have got their own country. But the thing is, they kept taking bits more, and encroaching onto the Arabs. And I don't agree with all that. The thing is, there should be two states, but they're not going to do it very well at the moment. It's just going to end in a terrible, terrible bloodshed.
I want the two-state solution as well, Sue. I want the solution that involves a peace in the Middle East. I certainly don't want a one-state solution, which is what Hamas want. They want Israel to be obliterated. Thank you, Sue. I appreciate that, Sue, in the New Forest there. Dan and Kent says the left can't win a government democratically. Labour are only in government by default, simply because the Tories didn't turn up. Let's not forget Starmer had fewer votes than Corbyn and Blair, and was a capitalist and Blair was a capitalist in disguise. The left support regimes like Iran and Palestine because they're the only way to keep power. Dan, it was a democratic vote. However people voted, we don't know what was going through their mind. Look, it was definitely a very anti-Tory vote, and maybe Labour did win by default, but it's democracy. I know exactly where you're coming from. I can see your point. I sort of politely disagree with you there. Hi, Peter. Absolutely disgusted with Glastonbury for allowing this Bob Vylan anti-Semitic performance to play out. The BBC should also hang their heads in shame for playing this. Surely this is incitement to violence. I suppose this moronic behaviour will go without prosecution, but don't dare tweet anything. You'll get 30 months in prison. We will see what happens. I have high hopes for Avon Somerset Police. I have high hopes that the law will be implemented, that they will arrest this guy. And I really do think if it can't stop with him, okay, there were thousands of people shouting exactly the same thing. If they arrest this guy and they arrest him for shouting that, well, that's incitement to violence. Well, if someone else shouts it back at a music festival in that context, well, that's incitement too. So I think they've got to apply the law to everybody, not just this singer in Bob Vylan, which is two people, and they don't give their names, blah, blah, blah. I think we're going to know their names pretty soon. I would imagine they will be on various documents in the public domain. Sarah in London says the future is pretty grim, isn't it? But at least the Britain and Jew haters are coming out in their full glory for all of us to see now. Shame about the useful idiots who are Brits, including the BBC, says Sarah. Kevin says, I think the likes of Rod Stewart and other performers should cancel Glastonbury. Another person says, you say you're against banning things, and I agree, but it's getting to the point where banning is the only way. Unfortunately, there's a huge number of people who are not responsible and have no regard for the law. Well, this is precisely what happens in a country that has so much freedom but has zero policing to back it up. This has been going on for years. Ernie says, hi Peter, I wonder how many of the flag-waving anti-Jew chanting festival goers at Glastonbury would be waving the flags and chanting death to the British and waving the flags of a terror group if it killed and rapes thousands at this Glastonbury festival. Ernie, spot on, every single word. Let's play a couple of voice notes here because there are an awful lot of people who want to get in and give their thoughts across. I want to play one from Anne on the Roger Bolton interview. Now, Roger Bolton is, of course, a senior, was a senior BBC executive and presenter as well. He was the editor of Panorama. This is what Anne thinks about Roger Bolton.
Hi, this is Anne here from Bournemouth. Great show. That guy you had on from the BBC, the bald one, I mean, that just epitomises to me what the BBC is about. They're just anti-Semitic. They've got very narrow minds, and they're just pro-terrorism, unfortunately. And for what happened at Glastonbury, I mean, I just think it's absolutely despicable that a calm music festival should be turned into pure hate. And if this guy on the stage doesn't get arrested and get locked away for a very long time for inciting murder, not just hate, inciting murder, I'm just absolutely ashamed to be British.
Thank you for your thoughts there. I just want to be absolutely clear that there's no suggestion whatsoever that Roger Bolton endorses terrorism in any way. He doesn't, and he made that clear in his interview, but certainly, and I was quite astonished at some of the things he said. Marshall's in Leeds and has some thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Marshall, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Great show as always. I think what people tend to neglect is the impact that events like this have on the Jewish community. And, you know, we're going through a tough enough time as it is. We're going through a very hard time on the streets. We're going on a very hard time online. And stuff like this just makes it even worse. And it should be absolutely... People should be ashamed of the BBC. The BBC should be ashamed of itself. I'm speechless. I'm absolutely speechless, but I'm not shocked because we've seen it before with the BBC. I'm co-founder and co-chair of an organisation in Leeds called Leeds Against Anti-Semitism, and every week we hold vigils in Leeds to defend that. And some of the comments we get are absolutely despicable. Some of the hate that we get is absolutely despicable.
And we're in a position, Marshall, aren't we, where police routinely troll social media for hate crimes. Hopefully now, presumably, they're now doing this to identify people in the crowd at Bob Vylan's performance yesterday and people who endorsed it, because there'll be a load of people online who will say, good for you, great guy, yeah, Bob Vylan's amazing. There'll be a lot of people who did that. So if they're going to troll social media and apply the law equally and without fear or favour, there are an awful lot of people who should be getting a knock at the door very, very soon in the crowd and people online who are endorsing this.
You know, you're perfectly right, but you know as well as I know that's never going to happen because it doesn't fit the rhetoric of the two-tier policing that I feel personally that we have. I can tell you that if I went to stand at one of the pro-Palestinian marches with an Israeli flag, I'd get moved on. Yeah, the abuse that sometimes we get on the street is almost ignored, the abuse that was thrown yesterday at Glastonbury. You know, I saw a Nova flag at Glastonbury yesterday. I think one or two flags with the... Imagine how those people felt that were at Glastonbury. Imagine how the Jewish people who went to Glastonbury felt about that abuse.
Yeah.
And the irony behind it, you know, a music festival, Peter.
Yeah.
A music festival.
And the irony will have been lost on them, Marshall. The irony will have been lost on them because they won't know about the Nova Festival, or they'll have heard of it and they'll have willfully decided, like Greta Thunberg, who was in Israel, oh no, I don't want to look at that footage. I don't want to watch that amazing Emmy-winning documentary, We Will Dance Again. I don't want to engage with it. I don't want to read that article. I don't want to see that perspective of a Jewish person. I don't want to see that perspective of an Israeli because I don't care. They're all evil. They're all bad people.
It's fashion. It's popular, and you know it's growing. It's growing, and people, the Jewish community here, feel very, very insecure. They feel threatened. We feel threatened, and not they. I'm a very proud member of the Jewish community, and I feel threatened. I don't. You know, I saw a tweet this morning. Somebody put on Twitter, "I once called myself a proud British Jew. I am proud I am Jewish, but I don't know what's happened to being a proud British Jew because what's happened to the UK? The UK is broken."
Well, and I can't speak for the Jewish people, but it doesn't seem to me that Britain is proud of you in many respects. I am proud to say I have many Jewish friends, and I care a lot about Jewish people. I care a lot about the Israeli cause, by which I mean the people of Israel, not necessarily the government of Israel. But Marshall, right, a final answer, Marshall, because we've got to move on, but great call, and thank you for ringing me today. I really appreciate it. What can we do, right? I'm obviously not Jewish. What can we do to try to help you in some way? What can the people watching and listening here, who might just feel powerless, who might just feel this is a wave of anti-Semitism, what can other people, ordinary people, do to help our Jewish friends and neighbours who've done nothing wrong, who've been proud patriots like you, Marshall?
You know what? First of all, it's a fantastic question. The second thing is there are plenty of grassroots organisations fighting anti-Semitism. I mentioned one that I'm a co-founder of. We're in Leeds. We're called Leeds Against Anti-Semitism. We stand every Tuesday And I'll tell you something, over the last year or so, the majority of people that stand with us are now not Jewish. We have Muslims, we have Indians, we have Christians. You know, if I can get our details off air to you, and you can spread the word.
Give them to me on air. Give them to me on air. What's your website?
Well, the website is Leeds LEADS AA leadsAA.org.uk.
Okay.
And they can contact me directly on that, and if they want to get involved to help, then we will absolutely welcome them.
Leeds AA. Okay.
.org.uk.
leadsAA.org.uk. I might have a look at that website myself after the programme. Marshall, thank you. Keep doing exactly what you're doing, and don't take any nonsense. Thank you very much indeed. That's Marshall in Leeds there. We're going to talk to Lord Walney in a second. He's the former government advisor on political violence. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we just have the Spectator are reporting a very interesting line on this because, of course, there is a charge that has been made against a member of NECAP, and we're going to be very careful about that. I definitely don't want to prejudice a trial in regard to that. And there have been videos emerging that we have spoken about previously in regard to them saying, kill your local MP. Now, that's not part of the court case. There was a grovelling statement from the band insisting they'd never supported various terror groups that were involved with that and they would not incite violence against any individual. David Amos's family, of course, the Conservative MP who was murdered, his family were very, very unhappy. And interestingly, the Spectator Steerpack column has checked with the counter-terror police, and on that particular specific matter, kill your local MP, NECAP, the band, are not going to be charged. A Metropolitan Police spokesman told the Spectator a thorough investigation has now been completed by detectives from the Counter-Terrorism Command, which included interviewing an individual under caution and seeking early investigative advice from the Crown Prosecution Service. A range of offences were considered as part of the investigation. However, given the time elapsed between the events in the video and the video being brought to police attention, any potential summary-only offences were beyond the statutory time limit for prosecution. Relevant indictable offences were considered by the investigation team, and based on all of the current evidence available, a decision has been made that no further action will be taken at this time. The spokesman added, safety and security of MPs is something that is taken extremely seriously across the whole of policing. So that is the Metropolitan Police saying that when NECAP said, kill your local MP at a concert in London, they've investigated that. I think from memory, I could be wrong, but from memory I think it happened in November. They're saying that no charges will be brought because of that. Lord Walney, John Woodcock, is the former government advisor on political violence. I want to talk to you about Glastonbury, John, but I wonder if you could give me your reaction to the Metropolitan Police's statement.
Yeah, I've just seen that flash up on Twitter as well. It's deeply disappointing. It is a binary thing, whether it was within the statute or not. I'm surprised to hear the police saying it wasn't. I assume they are correct in that view, but clearly that's going to be scrutinised given how serious a matter it was, and frankly the lack of confidence in the Met and other police forces in their ability to bring prosecutions on serious issues like this. But
you're right, John, in that there's a complicated matter here about statute of limitations. But what most people will see, and it is a factual view, is that someone said at a concert, kill your local MP, and the Metropolitan Police say, nothing to see here. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, it's not only the Met, it's how everyone else reacts to them, and this is highly relevant, of course, to the situation at Glastonbury, because a number of festival organisers, concert organisers, saw the risk of maintaining a platform for NECAP in these circumstances, plus the terror charge that a member of the group is facing, and they wisely withdrew their invitation for them to play. But Glastonbury, of course, didn't.
Glastonbury said in a statement today, as a festival, we stand against all forms of war and terrorism. I don't want to prejudice a trial, and I know you won't either, John, because you understand the law around this, but they quite literally say we're against all forms of war and terrorism, and they have quite literally put someone on a stage who is facing a terror charge.
Exactly. A terror charge in relation to a profoundly anti-Semitic organisation. And I mean, I ask Emily Eavis, would you really have made that call if the terror charge was relating to National Action? A terrorist organisation who targets black people. I mean, I think it's unthinkable that a similar situation would be happening. So yet again, you get the sense from, aside from what the Met is doing over this particular charge, you get the sense that there is a lesser racism, potential terrorism that involves is targeted at Jewish people is treated as less serious than other forms.
And on that note, John, I do wonder if Bob Vylan, the music group, yesterday had shouted death, death to black people, death, death to gay people, death, death to women, death, death to any other minority. I know women aren't a minority, but any other minority, Muslims, whether the BBC would have continued showing the set for another 40 minutes, whether Glastonbury and Glastonbury organisers, who could have taken them off the stage but didn't, for another 40 minutes. And their words are ringing pretty hollow to me today, John, when they're saying we're appalled by this, you know, it's really crossed the line, you know, we've got to remind everybody there's no place for anti-Semitism at Glastonbury. Well, I mean, you're saying that now, but you let these people continue for another 40 minutes when you could have taken them off very, very easily.
Yes, exactly. I think this is particularly serious for the BBC because they could see this coming. They were under a great deal of scrutiny over NECAP. They must have been aware of the dangers of a group like this one saying something unacceptable, and either they didn't think to have processes in place that were credible, simply, as you say, to pull the plug, or they could easily have broadcast these events as live with, say, a 30-second or a minute delay, so that if something unacceptable came up, they stopped it. Or they did have those procedures and they thought it was okay. Yeah. Either way, the corporation at a very senior level is in deep trouble over this, and people are going to be wanting. It's good that the culture secretary Lisa Nandy was asking them formal questions immediately, but this is a very difficult time for them over the next few days.
It certainly is. I wonder, just final question before you go, John, I know you're a former Labour MP. Labour, of course, coming up to its 1-year anniversary. Keir Starmer facing serious questions about his leadership at the moment. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not been a great year, and they have, in a way, it's refreshingly honest, I suppose, that they are approaching the 1-year anniversary being clear on that. The Labour Party and mainstream politics is in a very difficult position, languishing in the polls to a political party which, in one sense, in organisational terms, has relatively come out of nowhere, but it is being able to harness a frustration that has built up in the British public with all the mainstream parties for many years now. I think one of the key issues is that Keir Starmer and the team have got to be able to do better at communicating what really matters to them, why they want to change the country, and stick to a narrative and a programme of change, because that hasn't always come across in this last year. And I think the public sort of pick it up if it seems to be the case that there is a leadership that's sort of moving from one issue to another without really giving the sense that they are properly understood and are driving a wider sense of change. But there is time to turn this round. In a way, they've got a golden opportunity to do that with the size of majority, but they've got to realise what is at stake here. We are staring down the barrel of a Reform victory at the next election, which is an extraordinary thing to say. But now is the time to regroup and do better.
John, thank you. That is Lord Walney there, former government advisor on political violence. He's a former Labour MP as well. Lots of reaction coming in on this. We're going to speak to Jill in London after the break. More calls, more voice notes, more texts. Thank you to everybody. I don't think I've ever done a single show on basically a single issue. Okay, we've talked a little bit about obesity, we've talked a little bit about Keir Starmer as well, but mainly, overwhelmingly, we're talking about Glastonbury. We've said very kindly our guest on pubs has agreed with us that he should come on another time. We will have him on at some stage, but I want to hear from you. And this is my show, but it's your show too, and it's really important that we listen to you. And the almost overwhelming response that we're having today is something we're going to delve into in the next 15 minutes before the end of the programme. Stay with us.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots to discuss in the next few minutes. Many people getting in touch. Esme says, Peter, great show as normal. I'm not a Labour supporter, but Wes Streeting, good response to the questions. Glastonbury, well, what an awful scenario, and the artist should be arrested and imprisoned. William and Horley says, great show as always. I don't see how they can keep Lucy Connolly in jail while all of this is going on regarding the Glastonbury Festival and other things as well. It's just another example of broken Britain. Quite frankly, I'm glad I'm getting out. I'm moving to the Far East soon, but I'll try to listen to you from there. Good luck to you and all the lovely British people. Well, William, I hope we can keep you as a viewer and listener, certainly, and good luck in your future life. Dave says, artists at Glastonbury should have started with please pray for the people who were at a concert and lost their lives or are still hostages, instead of inciting hatred. Jill is in London and has given me a ring. Jill, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say today?
Okay, well, it is very upsetting hearing that on the radio, although I must say Talk Radio normally does have everything. What you say is very fair. But in Israel, all the 18-year-olds have to go into the IDF. It is a tiny, weeny little country. It takes 3 hours to drive across and 5 hours to drive the other length of it, including the desert. The Israelis are fighting for the world against a terrorist organization. The only people at the moment that seem to have any sense is the people of Iran are standing with the Israelis because they know they don't want that routine. They don't want that regime. The hostages are still being held, and sometimes I have great admiration for the people that are speaking out for the Israelis. Douglas Murray, I mean, he is amazing. The Arabs that are speaking out. But when you're playing that ditty, like, okay, I understand you have to play it maybe for a second so that people know what you're talking about, but when you're playing it for like half a minute, it's very upsetting because it's a very catchy ditty.
It upsets me, Jill. It upsets me, and I want people to know what happened at Glastonbury. Yeah.
Desperately. I mean, it's going to go, Hamas knew what they were doing at the beginning, and we just hope that Israel can actually do what they say, which is getting rid of Hamas. But of course, the first thing I remember when this all started was some of the really clever guys in Israel were talking about how we can heal this rift when the war is over, because the kids are going to be they're taught hatred. In the areas they're taught.
No, I've seen that in the schools. I've seen documentaries. I've seen what the children are taught. It is horrendous. Jill, really good thoughts there. Thank you for the call. Mac in Glasgow says, why couldn't the BBC pull the plug on this Vylan guy straight away? Why did they allow it to go out on air when they knew it was breaching Ofcom regulations? That's another point. We haven't even mentioned the word Ofcom today. I'm all for free speech, but this kind of abuse clearly crosses the line. The BBC and Glastonbury need to answer some serious questions. Glastonbury's licence to operate needs to be seriously questioned. I wonder as well about all the corporate sponsorships, about all the people who sponsor Glastonbury, all the people who advertise there, all the people who have stands there, all the different businesses that are there. I wonder what they think about this. I wonder if they're happy to book for Glastonbury next year. Well, there's been some news from The Spectator magazine. They've put on their website about a concert that I think it was at the Kentish Town Forum in London in November 2024 when Kneecap, one of the bands who were playing at Glastonbury yesterday, one of their members encouraged people to riot at a upcoming court case, but this is not related to that court case. This is something different. This is a specific occasion when one of the members of Kneecap said to their fans, we think at the Kentish Town Forum in London in November 2024, kill your local MP. Well, the Metropolitan Police says that a thorough investigation has now been completed with detectives from the Counter-Terrorism Command, and guess what? They're not going to prosecute Kneecap. The investigation included interviewing an individual under caution and seeking early investigative advice from the Crown Prosecution Service, says the Metropolitan Police. A range of offences were considered as part of the investigation. However, given the time elapsed between the events in the video And the video being brought to police attention, any potential summary-only offences were beyond the statutory time limit for prosecution. Relevant, indictable offences were considered by the investigative team, and based on all of the current evidence available, a decision has been made that no further action will be taken at this time. Kill your local MP is what NECAP said. They will face no action. Nothing. Nothing. Not arrest, not charge, not prosecution, because they said, kill your local MP. Britain 2025. Paula's in High Barnet. Paula, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
I'm not going to say anything off the cuff, I promise. What I will say is this whole scenario, it was disgusting. I saw the clip. Normally I watch the festival on the TV, but I checked through the bands and I didn't know a lot of them. And in this case, I didn't really know much about NECAP. Definitely didn't know anything about this vinyl.
Bob Vylan, yeah.
Sorry. But what I will say is, yes, we're all in shock because it is disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. BBC should be ashamed of themselves. They really need to give their heads a wobble, as Wes had said. What I will say is these are unknown artists, and what they've done, they've used the hate speech.
But the problem I have, Paula, is that they weren't unknown. I mean, they're unknown to you and me.
Well,
but Glastonbury, to us, of course. But to Glastonbury, they knew they weren't going to come on stage and go, "Isn't it lovely to be here? Let's play some music." They have form on this. They've said lots and lots of things which are deeply offensive.
Well, they must have known that they got this gig months ahead, a year ahead, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say is what they're doing, both of them, they're using these, and I will say they're unknown artists because I don't know nothing about their music. They haven't promoted their music. What they have done is promote hate speech, and it's to prop up their average talent. And I'm sorry, it's average talent with the focus. Don't forget, it's the focus on making cash off the backs of a serious situation.
Well, I think
know nothing about.
I think they are now worried about that money, and that's why I think they've put out their statement, which frankly is absolute nonsense. Ed has been in touch about Wes Streeting, the interview, and what Labour have done in a year. This is what Ed has to say.
Hi Peter, it's Ed here from Liverpool. Just listen to Wes Streeting name his successes or the government successes after 1 year. The things that they've had nothing to do with or do not require any skill or anything of any ability. So one, interest rates falling 4 times, completely out of their control. And 2, he referenced free school meals. Well, that's just spending taxpayers' money and just giving it away. He's done nothing to actually drive any savings, drive any growth or anything that requires hard work and ability. Spending money and just giving it to groups of people is easy. It's what councils do, and it's unfortunately the politics of the likes of the Labour Party. It doesn't get the country on its feet.
Thank you, Ed. Debbie's been in touch.
Hi, Peter. Debbie from Croydon here. Why do you keep giving that idiot, Bob, whatever his name is, airtime? Every few minutes you're playing what he said. You're giving him publicity. That's what he wants, surely, to spread his disgusting, filthy words. Just don't play it, man.
Debbie, thanks for that. We've got to tell people the news, and I think that people won't know about this, and I want people to be as outraged as I am, quite frankly, because it's absolutely appalling. So, Debbie, I respectfully disagree with you. Jamie is the last voice note of the day. This is what Jamie had to say.
Hi, this is Jamie from Nottingham. Like a lot of the callers this morning, I do believe that this was pre-planned and the BBC were informed beforehand. It seems too coincidental that NECAP were not going to be shown live, then the bump before them does actually say some very nasty statements. I believe that someone at the BBC knew about this and they let it go out, and Glastonbury knew about it. Absolutely shameful.
Jamie, I don't know if Glastonbury knew about it. They knew these people had form. I don't know if the BBC knew about it necessarily, but what I do know is that someone, somewhere high up in the BBC, it will not have been a junior person, someone high up in the BBC saw this rant that we have played to you too many times for Debbie's thoughts, but certainly someone saw this and thought, we'll just keep these guys on air. No problem here. We'll just keep playing that for 40 minutes. We've got a little warning on the screen that says might be offensive, so we'll just do that. I'm going to talk to Fian Berkshire for just a second, but I want to say thank you to the top team behind the glass who've made the show today. Chris Jacobs has been the producer, Hannah Reid, the assistant producer. Hannah's first time with us. Hannah, you're very welcome to the programme. Thank you so much for all your help. Dave Rhodes, the tech op, Faith Eden and Kalila Bradley have been the visual producers, Park Birmingham, the video editor, and Dean Spencer, the weekend editor. Fian Berkshire, you have the last word on the programme today. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi, Peter. Great show as always.
Thank you.
There's a few things I'd like to say.
You've got about 1 minute, so go for it.
1 minute. Okay, so the first point is I'm appalled that this has been shown, and Glastonbury, in my mind, is no longer just a music festival anymore. This is it for me. I have no interest in watching it anymore. The few clips I have seen, I was very sad to not see any Union Jacks. In relation to the audience in the crowd chanting along with him, I think they should be